Art felt the blood drain from his face, but he didn't flinch. Despite the casual tone in which Agrona had revealed himself, Art knew he was being studied. Every twitch, every breath, every micro-expression. The same topaz eyes that had moments ago been filled with innocent curiosity were now a deep, luminous ruby, brimming with intelligence, arrogance, and ancient authority. Agrona could have claimed to be a cosmic entity from another world entirely, and in that moment, Art wouldn't have questioned it. But he didn't show it. With a flick of his wrist, Art cast several spells in one fluid motion. The door slammed shut behind him, sealed tight by a slab of stone that surged from the ground. A shroud of swirling wind wrapped around the room, dampening any sound from escaping. "Is Sylvie safe while you're in control of her body?" he asked evenly. Agrona inhaled deeply, his expression almost wistful. "Sylvie. A good name," he murmured, as though savoring it. "Yes. What you're witnessing is a harmless spell I embedded into her before she even hatched. Sylvie is merely sleeping." Two stone chairs emerged from the ground with a low rumble, and Art lowered himself into one, motioning for Agrona to do the same. Agrona accepted the invitation with an easy smile, settling back into the seat as though he had all the time in the world. "Thanks for the hospitality, and for keeping your wits intact. Communication's much smoother when you're not actively trying to murder me." "You're possessing my bond," Art replied coolly. "Hurting you in this form wouldn't do much." Agrona gave a light shrug. "True enough. I couldn't put up a fight even if I wanted to. I don't have access to any mana arts like this, but I digress. Perhaps we can discuss something a little more important than the many limitations of this particular method of contact?" The seconds stretched, the only sound between them the faint whisper of the wind barrier enclosing the room. They sat there, silently staring across the stone table. Two enemies face to face, the war momentarily set aside. Art's mind spun in overdrive. He tried to process the surreal reality of this meeting, to assemble some plan, some clever line of questioning that could give him an edge. After all, how often did one get to sit down with the enemy's leader in the middle of a war? But even with all his experience, his thoughts were fragmented. Whether it was disbelief, the lingering anxiety over Sylvie's well-being, or the simple weight of the moment, his focus refused to settle. So, instead of strategy, he asked the one question that had been gnawing at him from the instant Agrona took control of Sylvie's body. "You said you were grateful that I happened to be in the same room when you made the connection," Art said, his voice measured. "Why did you only seek me out?" Agrona leaned back, looking unbothered. "Fair question. First reason, and probably the more obvious one, is that most of your esteemed leaders wouldn't take too kindly to me popping in for a chat, especially in the body of a little girl. Assuming they even believed I was who I claimed to be, it would scare the living daylights out of them to realize I could infiltrate the most secure place on the continent without lifting a finger." He paused, a faint smirk curling at the edge of his lips. "Although, I'll admit, their reactions would be entertaining." "And the second reason?" Agrona leaned forward, his grin widening. "Because," he said, voice dropping into something just shy of conspiratorial, "you're the only one on this continent I'm interested in." Art blinked. That wasn't the answer he'd been expecting. What could the leader of a rogue Asura clan, one that had likely existed for centuries, if not millennia, possibly want with him? Whatever the reason, it couldn't be good. His silence must have given something away, because Agrona chuckled, sharp and amused. "Don't worry, I'm not going to pin you to the ground and ravish you." He gestured vaguely at Sylvie's small body. "Even if my tastes were that way inclined, it'd be wildly inappropriate in this form. Wouldn't you agree?" Art rolled his eyes, fighting the instinct to scowl. For someone orchestrating a continental war, Agrona's attitude felt too casual, too unpredictable. He couldn't tell if it was part of some calculated facade, or if this truly was the mind behind the chaos. Either way, it only made him more wary. "You're a lot more eccentric than I imagined, almost sociable," Art remarked, watching Agrona with wary curiosity. Agrona raised a brow, clearly entertained. Did you picture me as some stoic dictator in a flowing silk cape, hell-bent on global domination? Something like that, Art admitted. Agrona leaned forward, adopting a solemn expression. Well? A beat passed before his grave look broke into a mischievous grin. You're partly right. He reclined again, shifting in the stone chair as though no position suited him for long. Don't let the friendly demeanor fool you. I have my ambitions, my public mask, and the authority to match. But as for my personality, well, after spending generation after generation mingling with your kind, trying to keep up appearances is exhausting. You mortals rewrite your morality and social rules every few decades. He chuckled under his breath and gestured casually. Take my own continent, for example. Just a few centuries ago, public torture and executions were perfectly acceptable. They made a whole event out of it. Families brought snacks, vendors set up stalls, people laughed while someone screamed. He sighed, the gesture oddly theatrical. Now? It's a scandal. Apparently such things are barbaric and inhumane. He waved a hand, as if brushing aside the entire concept. Luckily, I have others to manage the lesser races. People who can keep up with the ever-shifting tides of mortal righteousness. I simply don't have the patience anymore. Wow, he talks a lot, Art thought, though he couldn't deny that Agrona's rambling held more than a few valuable insights. For all his flair and dramatics, the Vritra leader had peeled back a curtain Art hadn't even realized was there. Up until now, everything he'd witnessed, Alacrian soldiers on the battlefield, the deranged experiments of figures like Uto, and the fanatic cruelty of that witch, had painted a single, stark image. Alakria was a wasteland ruled by tyrants, where the lessers existed solely to serve the whims of the Vritra. But Agrona's words told a different story. If what he said was true, then Alakria wasn't a nightmare kingdom of shackled slaves and eternal suffering. It was a developing nation, flawed perhaps, but functioning. One with rulers who, at least outwardly, seemed to care about order and the well-being of their citizens. Across from him, Agrona's crimson eyes sparkled with mirth. He pointed a finger lazily in Art's direction. That look you've got right now, that irritating one, that's the face of someone realizing their enemy might actually be a competent ruler. Art didn't flinch. Well, from what the Asuras told me, you've been conducting experiments on the Lessers and even breeding with them long before you were exiled from Epheotis. Agrona didn't deny it. Instead, his grin only widened. Art had expected some kind of reaction, defensiveness, irritation, even scorn. But Agrona didn't snarl or scoff. Instead, his grin faded, replaced by a look of quiet gravity. The best lie, Agrona murmured, is only telling half the truth, I suppose. His fingers tapped idly against the armrest, though his gaze was steady. Kizes and that lackey of his, Winsome, they never told you the real reason I did all this, did they? Art raised a brow, filing away the new name. Kizes. So that was Lord Indrath's first name. They said you wanted to build an army strong enough to bring down the other Asuras, Art replied evenly. Agrona gave an exaggerated eye roll and leaned forward slightly, the barest edge of frustration in his voice. That's all they told you. He clicked his tongue, then exhaled in disappointment. Arthur, do you think I one day just woke up wanting to commit genocide against my brethren? Any reason you have isn't justification for what you're trying to do, Art stated firmly. He scoffed. I should have more or less expected you to have the same mindset as Kezis and the rest of his underlings. Annoyed, Art asked, What do you mean? Let's suppose you lived in this continent without being able to use magic. How differently would everyone you know have treated you today? The royal families you know? They wouldn't bat an eye in your direction. Your peers from Xyrus? You would never have met them. Probably would have just befriended thugs and farmers from your own social class. Your family? Well, they might be the only ones that love you, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't be inwardly disappointed by your lack of talent. Art raised a brow. And This hypothetical person is supposed to relate to you? Basilisks in general were notorious amongst other races, but imagine if your very clansmen and family looked down on you for the minuscule talent that you had no control over. The same Lord Indrath who approved of you in that brusque and lofty way of his didn't even find it worthwhile to breathe in my direction. Agrona spat, his fingers clawing away at the armrest. So, you found it justifiable to inhumanely toy with the lives of countless lessers in order for you to get stronger? Art shot back. He tilted his head. Do you shed tears for the ants you step on? Rage smoldered deep in Art's gut, but he held it in check. Despite Agrona's dismissive words, there was no mockery in his tone, no gleeful cruelty, just cold conviction. That somehow was worse. He truly believed the lessers were no more than tools, resources, bugs. It was naive of me to think we could have a rational conversation, Art said, his voice low and taut with restraint. Agrona simply smiled, spreading his arms as if to welcome the accusation. And yet, here we are, speaking so rationally, he replied, his expression bright with a twisted kind of pride. What I achieved through those experiments has uplifted not just myself, but the entire lesser population of Alakria. They worship me, not from fear, but reverence. In their eyes, I am a savior. A savior? Art scoffed, unable to hide the disgust in his voice. Did you erase their memories of your people murdering and torturing their ancestors, or do they just thank you for it now? Agrona clutched his chest in mock pain. Such harsh words, he said with a dramatic sigh. Arthur, I merely optimized what was already available. The lessers I used, voluntarily or not, played a vital role in the evolution of their own species. Through their sacrifice, their descendants now walk taller, live stronger, cast further. That is something worth being proud of, don't you think? Art's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to wipe the smug grin right off Agrona's face. But what disturbed him more than the arrogance was the certainty behind it. This wasn't just posturing. Agrona believed every word. This wasn't a monster reveling in his cruelty. It was a man convinced of his own righteousness. What exactly have you done? Art said, forcing his voice to remain calm. That makes decades of human experimentation worth it. What miraculous result justifies all that suffering? Agrona's smirk deepened. I'll answer your question with another. He lifted a hand, fingers lazily gesturing as if lecturing a classroom. I'm aware that in Dicathan, the ratio of mages to non-mages hovers around 1 in 100. A sad truth, no? He tilted his head. Now, what do you suppose the ratio is in Alakria? Art stayed silent. Agrona leaned forward slightly, pleased. 1 in 5. Art's eyes widened. 1 in 5, he echoed, stunned despite himself. Unimaginable, even by your lofty standards, isn't it? Agrona said with a self-satisfied wink. You're welcome. I'll admit that what you managed to do is impressive, but aren't you afraid that with so many of the population being mages, those who still hold a grudge against you will band together and revolt? Agrona looked at Art for a second in silence before he burst out laughing. Oh, you weren't joking, he said in between laughs after seeing Art's expression. Like I said earlier, my people, whether they have some of my genes or they're still full-blooded lessers, revere me. Because of the structured process of awakening I have devised for them, many of them can utilize magic to improve their mundane lives. You're telling me that you spent all this time and effort, created this entire method, for what? The actual benefit of Alacrians? Art asked, his voice thick with skepticism. I've heard the Asura's side, but since their view is clearly biased, I want to hear it from you. What's your goal in all of this? Agrona's eyes sparkled with amusement. Ooh, is this the part where the villain breaks into a long-winded monologue and reveals his nefarious plans to the righteous hero? He asked, clasping his hands together like a child awaiting story time. Art shook his head, exasperated. You're insane. Insanity is relative, Agrona replied smoothly, as if he'd heard the accusation 1,000 times before. And regarding your question, I have no intention of telling you anything. Art narrowed his eyes. You said earlier that you were interested in me. I assume that meant you wanted my help. But if you're keeping your goals secret, what exactly makes you think I'd even consider cooperating? Leaning back in his conjured stone chair, Agrona crossed one leg over the other with practiced ease. Oh, Arthur, I never expected you to join my side, he said. That's not what this is about. I told you all this because it's my hope that you'll remove yourself from the war. What? Why would I? Agrona held up a hand. Before you say no, consider this. Thus far, I've been progressing very conservatively in this war, refraining from unnecessary civilian deaths since I have use for them, but that does not mean it will continue this way. You've barely managed to cling to your life up until now, but this is just the start. Statistically speaking, how likely is it that your side can win this war, and that your family and other loved ones will be alive after everything? He paused before speaking again. You can hide, seek refuge in Alakria, anything really, just as long you don't become an opponent to my army. Guarantee that, and I will guarantee that you and your loved ones will be left untouched. It would have been a lie to say that no part of Art was tempted. What do you gain from me doing this? He asked slowly. Telling me to stay hidden, or even go to Alakria. Obviously, you want me alive. Why? If I'm not on your side, aren't I a threat? Agrona's expression didn't change. Despite how I may be perceived, and regardless of what I've done to reach my current station, I don't believe true allies are made through coercion. If I want you on my side, I won't try to force you. Not through fear, not through violence. Silence followed. Agrona waited patiently for an answer, while Art sat motionless, unable to offer one. He wanted to refuse, should refuse. But there was something about Agrona's words, or perhaps the unshakable calm behind them, that weighed heavier than expected. They didn't feel like empty rhetoric. It actually seems like you're considering it, Agrona noted, an edge of amusement creeping into his voice. As a small thank you for that, I'll share something. A few things perhaps. Answers to questions you may or may not have been asking yourself. He reached down and smoothed the fabric of the black robe draped over Sylvie's small frame, as if grooming himself for a more serious tone. First, he began, eyes glinting, your parents. They were attacked not long ago while delivering supplies to your forces at the wall, weren't they? He shot up from his seat, mana swirling rapidly around his entire body, ready to strike. Agrona remained seated, raising his hands in a calming gesture, though his eyes burned with intensity. You may not believe me when I say this, but your parents were left unharmed because I willed it. He paused briefly before continuing. Lastly, the Asuras have lost contact with your leaders, haven't they? Without waiting for a response, the Asura possessing Art's bond stood gracefully, composed as ever. That's because a few Asuras, including Aldir and Winsome, attempted to infiltrate my castle in Alakria, hoping to kill me while my forces were spread thin. Attempted? Art's heart pounded harder. So they failed. Doesn't that mean the treaty's broken? Agrona shook his head firmly. No, neither side wishes to break the treaty, but those who violated it had to be punished. So we forged a new agreement. Fear prickled at Art's mind, but he forced the question out. What is this deal you made? It would have been tempting to say that he remained unfazed and took the news in stride, but that would have been a lie. Inside, his mind was a storm of frustration and panic, every curse he knew swirling silently in response to the revelations. After gathering enough composure to speak, he finally asked, Why are you telling me all this? To appeal to you, of course. I'm trying to ultimately get you on my side willingly, remember? Agrona winked. Frankly, I don't see where your loyalty to those Asuras comes from. Kizes and the other Asuras that helped train you did so only for their own gains. You simply went along with it because you needed to get stronger to keep your loved ones safe. Seems more like a business arrangement to me. Art shook his head. Even so, you've said that you've been conservative during this war, but while you come off as well-mannered so far, your retainers have massacred soldiers with glee. Exactly as you said. Soldiers, Agrona pointed out, snapping his fingers. And really, I think it's hardly fair to bring that up when your side has treated my men with just about the same amount of hospitality. I'd say freezing my poor Jagret and displaying her corpse like some sort of trophy in front of your nobles is hardly any better than what she or any of my other soldiers have done. Art was at a loss for words. He shouldn't have been surprised that Agrona possessed such detailed information, but hearing him speak of events that had unfolded in the castle, as if he had been there to witness them firsthand, was difficult to digest. Clearly, Agrona was far better informed about their actions than they were about his. Silence enveloped the room, drawing Art's attention to the faint whistle of the wind swirling around them. What we've discussed today isn't something you can organize in a span of a few minutes. I'll give you some time to think about everything, Agrona finally said, breaking the quiet. Besides, Sylvie seems to be stirring from her sleep. After you've thought it over, recite this spell to Sylvie so you can give me your answer. He transmitted a string of foreign words mentally, allowing time for Art to commit them to memory. Then he continued, I advise you to make your choice soon, though. As I said earlier, we're progressing to the next stage of this war, and I assure you it won't be to your side's benefit. Offering you this deal does not grant you immunity from harm should you refuse or withhold your answer. Wait, Art called out. What you told me earlier, that I was the only one on this continent you're interested in. You never explained why. Agrona tapped his chin thoughtfully. I suppose it does no harm to tell you. Let's say I've enjoyed talking with an old friend of yours, King Gray. Stefan muttered under his breath. Oh, great Vritra, as one of the shields stumbled, nearly disappearing beneath the stampede of mana beasts. Shields, keep up those defensive panels. Don't let any of the beasts stray from the pack, he barked, his voice sharp with authority. Once the shields were properly chastised and had tightened their formation, Stefan allowed his gaze to drop to the peculiar black ore resting in his palm. The order had been clear. Crush it once the beasts had been successfully relocated to the Elshire forest. His eyes shifted back to the surreal procession unfolding before him. Hundreds of corrupted mana beasts shuffled forward, penned in by the shield's conjured translucent panels. The sight was both unnerving and fascinating. Creatures that would normally tear each other apart or scatter in fear now trudged side by side in eerie silence. Spiders the size of hounds, monstrous wolves clad in jagged ridges of dark bone, and twin-headed serpents with sickly glowing scales all moved as one, driven by an unseen compulsion. They didn't growl or snap. They didn't resist. They simply marched. Scattered among the line were several unads, non-mages, stationed near each shield, weapons drawn, alert for any sign of a beast breaking free from its daze. Stefan's grip on the oar tightened. This was no ordinary mission, and whatever was bound inside this strange mineral, it would change things the moment it was released. Even unads have their uses. Better one of them dies than a mage. Stefan's gaze swept over the unads, clad in iron and gripping weapons of mundane steel, tools they couldn't even enhance with mana. Pitiful, he thought with a flicker of disdain. He turned his attention to the sentry assigned to his force. Ashton, a lanky man with long bangs that veiled most of his face. Can you get a read inside the forest? Stefan asked curtly. Ashton dropped to one knee, pressing his palms to the ground in focus. After a moment, he replied, My range is cut to about a fourth inside there. Then it looks like you'll have to go in with us, Stefan said flatly. Ashton jerked back, his eyes wide beneath his fringe. What? That's not what... Before he could finish, Stefan seized him by the throat and yanked him forward until their faces were inches apart. His voice was low and cold. Listen, I don't care that you sentries think you're special because of your voyeuristic tricks. You'll stay close to my personal shield and caster, about as safe as anyone can be in there. Safer than you'll be if you keep running your mouth. The boy clutched Stefan's forearm with trembling hands, his breath catching in a choked grunt that Stefan assumed was meant to be a yes, sir. Merciful Vritra, Stefan thought grimly. He's not going to last long as a soldier if he's this rattled just being near a battle. You'll be fine, he said, loosening his grip. Now form the mental link, with me and only me. Something tells me you're not exactly gifted at multitasking. The sentry gave a nervous nod, then raised 2 fingers to Stefan's temple, closing his eyes in concentration. Can you hear me? A hesitant voice echoed directly in Stefan's mind. How is it that you stutter even inside your own head? He mused, barely resisting a sigh. I can only do one-way transmission of mental communication. I won't be able to hear back from you. Okay, Stefan replied aloud, rolling his eyes. He wasn't particularly impressed with the boy's skill, but at the very least, the sentry's presence meant his shield and caster wouldn't need to hover so closely. They could rely on the boy for updates and focus more freely on their roles. Stefan turned his attention back to the task at hand, eyes fixed on the corrupted mana beasts as they vanished one by one into the thick, hazy forest, the ancient domain of the elves in Dicathan. The mist hung heavy between the trunks, swallowing the grotesque silhouettes of the monsters as they trudged deeper into the trees. Only once the last of the beasts, herded carefully out of the northern stretches of the beast glades, had disappeared into the dense woodland, did Stefan raise the black oar in his hand. Unads, frontline positions with weapons ready. Strikers, form up behind them with your shields and casters close. Prepare to charge on my signal. Around him, several teams of mages who had been on standby, silently observing the shields shepherd the horde, sprang into motion at his command. In seconds, they were lined up along the forest's edge, weapons drawn, spells primed. Stefan scanned the formation, ensuring every unit was in position. Then, without hesitation, he clenched his fist and crushed the black oar. A sharp, unnatural pulse rolled through the air, and then chaos erupted. From within the forest came a surge of snarls, guttural growls, and bone-rattling roars as the spell binding the mana beasts shattered. Their stupor ended. The horde had awakened. Several unads moved briskly through the ranks, distributing vials of foul-smelling liquid to the waiting soldiers. The stench was sharp and acidic, making more than a few wrinkle their noses in disgust. Still, each soldier dutifully sprayed it onto their clothes. Expensive and short-lived though it was, the concoction would keep the corrupted beasts from turning on them, at least for a while. Once the task was done, a heavy silence settled over the company. Every soldier stood poised, waiting for the command to move. Stefan flexed his fingers, anticipation coiling in his chest. He was more than ready. It had been less than a season since he'd completed the training necessary to evolve his initial mark into a proper crest, an impressive feat for any Alacrian, let alone one who had only just turned 18. But it wasn't enough. He wanted more. Like his father, he aspired to earn the right to enter the Obsidian Vault, and if he proved worthy, to claim an emblem from within. He looked forward to returning to Alacria. He knew his father would survive the trials of the Obsidian Vault, and he wanted nothing more than to see what sort of emblem he would claim from within. Perhaps he'll be blessed with a legendary regalia. If so, the House of Vale will soar within all of Vekker, perhaps even within all of Alacria. Yet Stefan knew, deep down, that his father would never be capable of claiming a regalia. A mid-tier mage at best, his father had attempted the Obsidian Vault at a relatively young age, but even that boldness couldn't mask his limitations. Stefan, at only 18, had already matched him in raw power, twice his father's age, and yet still surpassed. That was the truth Stefan carried with him. He held no contempt for the man. On the contrary, he respected his father's strength and discipline. But in the end, he was just a shield, a guardian, a protector. Whereas a thunderous crash echoed in the distance, cutting through Stefan's thoughts. His enhanced senses, sharpened by the crest etched into his body, picked up the faint shouts that followed. Elves. A patrol must have stumbled upon the horde. He cast a quick glance over his shoulder, confirming that the signaling artifact, their beacon to guide them safely out of the forest, remained secured where it had been placed. Steeling himself, Stefan drew in a breath. "Charge!" he roared, his voice crackling with authority as he surged forward. In the same instant, he invoked his crest, mana flaring to life as it surged across his skin like a living armor, wrapping his body in a gleaming sheath of power. The non-mages surged forward first, a thunderous wave of war cries and clashing iron. There was no hesitation in their charge, no visible fear in their faces, only resolve in the face of death. Behind them came the mages, moving with measured confidence. Some murmured incantations under their breath, while others remained grim and silent, eyes scanning for threats as they advanced. Stefan followed, certain that it was his own commanding presence that fortified the troops. Their confidence was no accident. It stemmed from his strength, his mindset, his unwavering certainty of victory. The Decathians might have their strange, multifaceted magic, but to Stefan, this mission was nothing more than another rung in his ascent. Another chance to succeed. Another medal to pin to the legacy awaiting him in Alakria. He wove through the forest's shifting maze, the fog so thick he could barely see his own feet. But the sounds of battle ahead cut through the mist like blades, shrieks, snarls, the hum of magic being unleashed. As he pushed forward, the haze thinned just enough to reveal the clash between the corrupted mana beasts and the defending elves. Despite being outnumbered, the elves were holding their ground with fierce tenacity. Arrows glowing with mana zipped through the trees, each one striking true, felling monsters large and small alike. And the forest, ancient and alive, seemed to rise in their defense. Vines lashed out from the underbrush, wrapping around limbs and necks, choking and dragging down the more massive beasts in a tangle of roots and thorns. Nearby, Stefan's eyes locked onto an older elf amid the chaos. She carried no visible weapon, yet summoned deadly blades of wind with a flick of her hand, sickles of compressed air that tore through several beasts in a single motion. Precise. Lethal. She was his target. Seren, focus shields on me and stay back with Mari. Ashton, stick close to them and relay my position if I'm in danger, Stefan commanded without slowing. At once, polygonal panels of mana shimmered to life around him, orbiting his body in tight formation. Barriers forged by Seren to intercept any stray attacks. Behind him, a soft hum rose as Mari began gathering her magic, the air distorting faintly with raw, elemental pressure. Stefan drew mana through his crest and unsheathed his sword, a finely crafted weapon that had been enhanced by a high-grade instiller. The blade roared to life, engulfed in jagged, flickering fire. Not a clean, elegant flame, but a wild, tearing inferno that gouged and seared with every stroke. Without hesitation, he surged forward, the mist parting around him as he closed in on the elven mage. Mana continued to surge through Stefan's crest, flowing outward in steady pulses that fortified his limbs and quickened his stride. Power flooded his body, exhilarating and familiar as he hurled himself into the fray like a true striker, sword blazing with jagged flame, a beacon of dominance for the soldiers behind him. The first elf to cross his path was a lean young mage with cropped hair and sharply drawn brows. The elf spun toward him, eyes widening as realization dawned. Wind gathered rapidly around the twin daggers in his hands, his lips moving in a spell, but he was far too slow. Stefan's blade crashed through the parry with explosive force, searing light trailing behind the strike. He felt the weapon bite into a thin layer of protective mana, then slide past it, carving into flesh. A flicker of pain and disbelief crossed the elf's face. Then he crumpled, lifeless, at Stefan's feet. So even a weak mage like this is able to protect himself with mana. How odd. These Decathian mages, while versatile, are just as slow as I'd heard, though. Primitive fools. All around Stefan, the battlefield had erupted into chaos. His fellow mages had already clashed with the elven defenders, spells colliding in bursts of color and force. The tide of battle was rapidly shifting in their favor. His soldiers fought with precision and ferocity, drawing the elves' focus and fracturing their lines. That distraction gave the corrupted mana beasts free rein. Unburdened by fear or instinct for self-preservation, the twisted creatures tore through the forest like living storms. They barreled through spells, trampled over the wounded, and lunged at anything that moved. Their sheer brutality, combined with the tactical pressure of the Alacrian forces, was overwhelming the elven defense. As Stefan neared the elf using Windblade magic, Ashton's voice rang once more in his head. Her mana readings are a bit different, but she should be around the lower end of a mid-tier mage. Your caster is readying her spell to single target. Proceed with caution, and I'll let you know when to get out of the way. So this is what it's like to have a sentry, even a half-baked one, accessible. No wonder they're considered valuable despite not having a single form of offensive or defensive magic. When Stefan had unlocked his mark after the awakening ceremony, the fire magic it granted gave his flames a jagged edge that tore through anything in their path, a rare, upper mid-tier mark. But after mastering that magic to the point of evolving it into a crest, he gained the ability to wield it in an entirely new way. Slowing to a cautious walk, he sheathed his sword and circulated more mana through his crest. His body erupted in flames, shrouding him in armor made of fire. 4 floating sickles of jagged flame appeared, orbiting around him, ready to strike at a thought. It was a powerful ability, but one that demanded his full concentration to control the fiery blades. His target unleashed another blade of wind, cutting down 2 more beasts before turning her full attention toward him. "Shield prepared to guard the attack," came the voice. Unlike the dagger-wielding elf he had just killed, her mouth didn't move as she cast her spell, unleashing a blade of wind aimed to cleave him in 2. Stefan sprinted forward, his movements fueled by the flames cloaking his body. 2 polygonal shields layered before him, ready to absorb the wind blade. The first panel shattered on impact, the second cracked, but the spell was dispersed. Just as he closed the distance to launch his fiery sickles, the sentry's voice echoed sharply in his mind. "Duck!" Without hesitation, Stefan dropped to the ground. The sudden movement broke his focus on the floating sickles, but he narrowly avoided a mana-clad arrow sizzling through the air. The arrow crackled like lightning overhead. He knew relying solely on his shields was a risk he couldn't afford. "I need to end this fast. I can't waste too much mana on just one enemy. There are many more to come." The drawback of using the full form of his crest was the immense mana required to sustain it. Each of the 4 sickles demanded a constant flow of mana to maintain, something Stefan knew he would need to improve if he ever hoped to control more orbiting flames. Pushing off the ground with both hands and feet, he dashed toward the elf just as she prepared to release another blade. One sickle arced down toward her clasped hands, but despite the speed of his blitz, she managed to dodge, pulling her hands away and letting the blade flash harmlessly past. That momentary distraction was all Stefan needed. He slammed a burning fist into her breastplate, shattering it and sending her hurtling backward into a tree. Releasing his flame-clad form to conserve mana, Stefan drew his blade, ready to finish off the elf. But just as he readied the strike, a terrifying presence gripped his very soul. "Stefan, get out of there! Now!" He wanted to obey, wanted nothing more than to flee like a rabbit sensing a fox, but instead found himself dropping to his knees, clawing at his chest, struggling to breathe. What in Great Vritra's name is this suffocating presence? He tried to crawl away, barely able to move. Saving face in front of his soldiers no longer mattered. If he didn't escape, he wouldn't live long enough to feel shame. Then, suddenly, the boy landed in front of him. Striking blue eyes, radiating raw power, glared down with unmistakable annoyance. Stefan was the son of Karnal Vale, heir to the House of Vale. Yet before this boy, who looked no older than himself, he was nothing. Not a warrior, not a leader, not a mage. Nothing. Stefan's body trembled and convulsed as an overwhelming power radiated from the boy, pressing down on him with the weight of a mountain and crushing him to the ground. From somewhere distant came a faint hum, followed by a beam of pure frost striking the boy. Stefan flinched and rolled away, narrowly avoiding the icy nova that erupted around him. That fleeting burst of hope gave him the strength to push himself to his feet and try to flee. But he barely managed 2 steps before a searing pain flared through his right arm, and the ground vanished beneath him. He toppled forward, unable to break his fall. His right side had gone numb, and with a detached clarity, he saw that his arm was severed, cut clean off by a spell. Crimson blood pooled beneath him, soaking both his uniform and the earth. Fighting through shock and disbelief, Stefan dragged himself forward with his left arm, unable to stand. Desperation began to rise through the haze as he searched for his teammates, but all he saw were Seren, Mari, and Ashton retreating into the trees. His vision dimmed as he found himself face level with grasping roots bursting from the ground. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Art surveyed his surroundings. The once lush green forest was stained with blood and littered with corpses. Even the thick fog did little to conceal the aftermath of the battle. "Thank you, General Arthur, for your aid." The female elf's voice was hoarse with pain, and she winced as she attempted to bow. His eyes lingered on the bodies. Too many were elven soldiers who had died trying to protect their home. "I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner. This could have all been avoided had I arrived before the beasts were herded into the forest." The elf shook her head. "Please don't apologize. The outcome of this battle would have been very different had you not come at all. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to gather my men." With a weary smile and a nod, the elf limped away, occasionally bending over a prone form to check for signs of life. Other elves, those still capable of movement, gathered around her, each wearing the same sad, stoic expression. Was this what Agrona had meant when he said the war was progressing to the next stage? This marked the first assault on elven territory, and even if this particular strike had been beaten back, it had served its purpose. Until now, Sapin had taken the brunt of the attacks, which had made it easier to allocate resources to a central location. Now, however, their enemies were striking Eleanor as well. How would the council choose to respond? "I'll have to check up on General Aya to see if she needs help," Art thought. A weak moan drew his attention to the Alacrian at his feet, whom he had managed to keep alive. He had severed the man's dominant arm, but otherwise kept him intact. The healthier the captive was to start, the longer he would last during the extraction of information. Art called out to a nearby elf, tasked with gathering the fallen soldier's belongings. "You, soldier carrying the weapons." The young elf glanced down at the arms in his grasp before realizing he was being addressed. Yes, General Arthur?" Art pointed toward the wounded Alacrian on the ground. "Take this one back to camp and dress his wound so he doesn't bleed out." A flash of disdain crossed the elf's face, but he quickly masked it and dipped his head in acknowledgement. "Oh, and make sure he doesn't kill himself before I get to interrogate him," Art added, as the elf roughly slung the captive over his shoulder. "Yes, sir," the elf replied with renewed determination, knowing that the prisoner's fate might be far worse than death. Art sank down onto a bed of thick moss and leaned his back against the trunk of a tree. He retrieved his water skin, taking a long pull and letting the cold water sit in his mouth before finally swallowing. A faint glow had begun to pierce the forest canopy, the first hints of sunrise. Through the dense latticework of leaves above, slivers of orange light filtered in, offering a touch of warmth to the otherwise damp and chill air. He allowed his mind to drift. He wasn't ready to think about the task still ahead. As it had each morning since that encounter, his conversation with Agrona replayed in his mind like a slow-moving echo. Art had made the choice to ignore Agrona's promise, his thinly veiled bribe to ensure the safety of Art's family if he withdrew from the war. The only one he'd told about it was Sylvie. Even then, he hadn't explained everything. He hadn't told her that she could be used as a mouthpiece by the enemy whenever Agrona wished. Art hadn't mentioned Agrona's appearance to the council, not even to Virion. Though Agrona had claimed he couldn't utilize Sylvie's mana, Art didn't want the others to panic and lock her in a cell. He still wasn't sure if hiding it was right, but he could only hope that a solution would present itself eventually. He had told Sylvie only that Agrona had contacted him, not how. He thought of the conversation too often to hide it from her entirely, and sharing his thoughts with her had eased his mind. Still, despite the weight of that conversation, things seemed to be getting better. His core had advanced to white, and with every moment his body continued to acclimate to the change, he felt stronger. The scars on his neck and wrist hadn't disappeared, but had faded significantly. His legs, which had endured several substantial injuries, felt more stable than before. Art knew his body hadn't changed physically, but using organic magic without predetermined gestures or chance, had become infinitely more natural to him. And with it came a path to grow even stronger. It also allowed him greater control over static void and the phases of his dragon's will. Though Lady Meyer had made it clear he would never wield ether like the Asuras, even he didn't know how far he could progress. He still couldn't use any sequence of Mirage Walk, including Burst Step, without causing irreparable damage to his lower body. With a deep breath, he squeezed his eyes shut. He had left Sylvie behind. She was still adjusting to the changes in her body now that the seal her mother had placed on her was broken. Though surrounded by constant movement as the elven forces worked to manage the aftermath of the recent battle, Art couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. Still, he knew he had made the right decision. He didn't want Sylvie, or anyone he knew, to witness what he was about to do to the Alacrian boy he had kept alive. I just hope things are better on General Aya's side, he thought. He and Aya had been ordered to confirm reports of the Alacrian assault on Elenoir and provide support in the defense if needed. News of the battle would have already reached Virion, and by now, the council chambers were likely in chaos, with its members arguing over how best to redistribute soldiers and mages to protect not only Sapin, but Elenoir as well. General Arthur, a familiar voice called from a distance, pulling his eyes open. It was the elf Art had ordered to carry the Alacrian back to camp. He approached at a swift pace, navigating the uneven terrain with practiced ease. "The Alacrian has awoken," he called. Art stood, brushing the dirt from his clothes. Steeling himself for what was to come, he reached inward toward the familiar emptiness. The cold detachment that would allow him to interrogate the enemy without remorse or sympathy. All the while, he tried to bury the memory of when their roles had once been reversed. "Strip the prisoner and remove everyone else from the room," he ordered. The encampment of elven troops lay in the middle of a small clearing that felt unnatural, just a few hundred yards north of the battle, or so Art thought. Even at the White Core stage, his senses weren't fully adjusted to the disorienting effects of the Elshire forest. Freshly filled holes in the ground and the unusually dense trees surrounding the camp suggested that the elves had a mage with a strong affinity for wood manipulating the environment. Elven soldiers moved briskly between tents made of thick fabric, filling the clearing. Some bowed respectfully as they passed, while others glanced warily in Art's direction. The elf gestured ahead. "This way, General. The Alacrian is in the tent at the rear. Our head is waiting just outside." The tent was actually a large canopy woven from twisted roots and branches with a thick cloth draped over it. A swirling dome of wind enveloped the wooden structure, causing the fabric to sway and ripple. Standing outside, her focus fixed on the entrance, arms extended and mana continuously circulating within her, was the same armored woman Art had saved from the prisoner himself. As she noticed their approach, she visibly relaxed and extended her hand. "I forgot to introduce myself earlier. My name is Lena Amaris, head of the Southeastern Unit in Illinois." "Arthur Leywin," he replied, shaking her hand before turning toward the tent. "He's able to talk?" Lena's face twisted in disgust. "He's been screaming and yelling since waking up, which is why I had to put up a wind barrier. It'll also give you some privacy," she added knowingly. "Thank you." Art took a calm breath, dissociating himself from the events about to unfold as he passed through the sound barrier without breaking the spell, a feat far harder than it looked. He couldn't think of himself as Arthur. He was an interrogator with a job to do. Inside the barrier, his ears filled with the angry shouts of a boy barking idle threats. "My arm! Where's my arm? If you primitive beasts know what's good for you, you'll untie me. I am of Blood Vale, a distinguished family of the—" Art's hand cracked across the boy's face, snapping his head back with the force of the blow. The boy stared, stunned. You slapped me. What's your name? I'll have you." His head jerked as Art struck him again. When the boy recovered, Art bent forward, locking eyes with him. "I don't think you truly understand the gravity of the situation you are in, so allow me to enlighten you." Fingers crackling with wire-thin tendrils of electricity, Art gripped the boy's forehead and squeezed down on his temples. The boy's body spasmed immediately as Art continued to wield his organic mana. Hand me! What are you doing?" the boy cried out. Art continued channeling carefully focused lightning mana into the boy's brain and nerves for several minutes until the effect took hold. A mind-numbing scream tore from the boy's throat as he thrashed wildly in his seat. "Burns! It burns!" "Of course it does," Art replied flatly. "Your nerve endings are a little confused right now, making it feel as if you're in a fire." The whites of the boy's eyes showed as he screamed, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. He struggled desperately, trying to put out a fire that wasn't there. After a few minutes passed, Art gripped his head again and eased the pain. Please. Why are you doing this? What do you want? I'll give you anything," the boy muttered between sobs, his whole body trembling in shock. "Your name," Art demanded without emotion. "Why do you need to know?" The boy let out a shrill cry the moment Art lifted his hand. Stefan Vale, please, no more." "Stefan, just looking at you, I know your family, or blood as you call it, is distinguished, meaning you are as well. Unlike the other soldiers we've captured so far, you've made no attempts to kill yourself, and wish dearly to live. Am I correct so far?" "Yes," he blurted out, clearly eager to avoid any more pain. Art chose his next words carefully before speaking. "I won't kill you if you cooperate. In what condition you make it back home, however, will depend on how helpful you are and how honestly you answer my questions. Do you understand?" He nodded fiercely. "A few of your troops have survived and managed to escape, but I strongly advise you rid yourself of the hope that any force they can muster up and bring back here will be strong enough to aid you." In his time as a silver and then white core mage, Art had grown accustomed to restraining his full power, knowing the aura of a white core mage could be crippling to those nearby. But now, he needed Stefan to truly understand his situation and believe what he was telling him, so he let go of his restraint. The thick roots and branches forming the tent cracked and snapped under the full force of a white core mage unleashed. The ground splintered, rubble shaking beneath their feet. Stefan struggled to breathe, even with the small amounts of mana cycling through his body. His bloodshot eyes bulged, his mouth hung open like a gasping fish, and an acrid stench rose from the wet spot between his legs. Art withdrew his mana. Understand? The boy stammered. Good, Art said, stepping back. He considered moving to more urgent questions, but decided to test if Stefan was telling the truth. List all of the members of the Vale House and your relationship to them. Fear flickered in the boy's eyes, perhaps thinking Art would use the information to annihilate his entire family, but Stefan lacked the strength to refuse. He rattled off names that meant little to Art until one came up he could verify. Azora Vale, my mother. Karnal Vale, my father. Lucia Vale, my sister. Art raised a hand to stop him. What is the awakening process? The awakening is the ceremony that unlocks for children their first mark so that they can become a mage, Stefan answered, his voice hoarse. What is the difference between a crest and a mark? Art asked, recalling the terms from his brief glimpse into Uto's memories through the horn. The boy recited his answer as if memorized from a textbook. A crest is stronger. It symbolizes a greater understanding of the specified root of magic that the mark enables the mage to utilize. Art's curiosity grew. He wanted to learn more about Alacrian magic. But he could tell Stefan was beginning to withdraw. He knew the longer this went on, the harder it would be to keep the boy motivated to answer, and without an emitter to sustain him, losing Stefan was a risk he couldn't afford. Choosing his words carefully, Art asked his next question, aiming to make Stefan believe he was merely confirming what Art already knew. It was the best way to get truthful answers. What stage is above marks and crests? He asked, gripping the boy's leg in warning as his eyes began to close. After crests are emblems, and then regalias, Stefan answered hurriedly. How strong are mages with regalias compared to retainers? I don't know. My family's highest power is my grandfather, and he's only an emblem mage. I swear on the name of Vritra. Swear on the name of Vritra, Art echoed with distaste. He had heard a similar saying inside the cavern in Darv. It seemed the Vritra were regarded almost like gods in Alakria. Do you know how many emblem and regalia holders are on Dicathan currently? The boy shook his head. My commander is an emblem mage, but I know he answers to a regalia holder. I don't know the exact numbers. Art sighed. The boy was too low in the ranks to be of any real use. From what he'd gathered, the House of Vale, which the boy had proudly claimed as his own, wasn't even very influential in Alakria. Finally, Art asked a few questions specifically about the orders Stefan had received. As he had feared, this was not the only attack targeting the Elshire forest. Several other troops were heading north, aiming to strike while the elven forces were still recovering, and before reinforcements could arrive from Sapin. Please, let me go now. You promised. I answered every one of your questions truthfully. The boy's shoulders sagged, the stump where his right arm had been bleeding through the bandages. Like I said, I won't kill you. With those words, Art left the tent. Outside, waves of elven soldiers arrived at the camp, some carrying bloodied allies, others moving the remains of fallen comrades. Art stepped beside Lena Imaris. She flinched when their eyes met, but stayed silent, waiting for his orders. His gaze remained cold. He refused to let any emotion interfere as he spoke. I'm done. Feel free to dispose of the Alacrian however you see fit. Gray's eyes snapped open, stinging sharply from a sudden blow to his cheek. Blinding light flooded his vision, directed straight at his face. His heart hammered in his chest as confusion overwhelmed his thoughts. He tried to rise, but quickly realized both his hands and feet were tightly bound to the chair he sat in. Gray, can you hear me? A dark silhouette asked from behind the harsh fluorescent glare. Where am I? Who are you? He groaned, his throat raw and burning. What's the last thing you remember? Another voice interrupted, ignoring his questions. Through the blinding light, Gray noticed a second, larger figure standing beside the first, though details of their appearance remained hidden in shadow. Gray's head throbbed painfully as he struggled to piece together his scattered memories. But slowly, the fog began to clear. I had just won the tournament, he managed to say. His eyes adjusted to the harsh light, revealing more of the room's details and the two figures standing before him. What else? The thinner man asked calmly, his tone measured and unhurried. I accepted an offer to be mentored by a powerful person, Gray replied carefully, hoping his vague wording would slip past unnoticed. The man's gaze sharpened. What is the name of this powerful woman, and what is the nature of your relationship? The fact that he already knew it was a woman only deepened Gray's suspicion. It felt like a test, one where the answer was already expected. Gray tugged at what felt like a thick metal wire tightly binding his wrists. Even with his strength bolstered by Kai, the restraints held firm. Realizing resistance was futile, he resigned himself to answering. I only know her as Lady Vera, he said quietly, and I just met her. The larger man, now visible with long, slicked-back hair, snarled, Lies. He raised a hand as if to strike, but the thinner man stepped forward, blocking the blow. What happened after you won the tournament, Gray? The thinner man asked next, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. Gray grimaced, struggling to piece together his fragmented memories. I think I headed back to my dorm room right after. Lady Vera had told him she'd contact him once things settled, but he wasn't about to give these men any more information than they demanded. Suddenly, a massive hand shot out, wrapping tightly around his neck and hoisting him, and the chair he was bound to, off the ground. Again, lies, the man hissed, his face looming close enough that Gray gagged on the stench of his fetid breath. Deep scars crisscrossed his face, twisting his already intimidating features into something even more terrifying. You'd be wise to tell us which organization sent you to protect the legacy. Organization? Legacy? The accusations made no sense, but with his throat crushed in the man's grip, all Gray could do was flail and choke until the thinner companion intervened, striking the hand away. Heavy from the chair and unable to support himself, Gray collapsed to the ground, his head snapping back against the hard floor with such force that darkness claimed him. When Gray came to, he found himself upright once more, still bound but now face to face with the thinner man, the one who, despite his lack of size or overt menace, somehow frightened him more than the towering, scarred brute beside him. The man's hair was cropped short, military neat, but his eyes were wrong, flat, glassy, like those of a dead fish. They never blinked as they bored into Gray's. Then, without a trace of genuine emotion, he stretched his thin lips into a grotesque parody of a smile, stiff and lifeless as a mannequin's. Strip him while I get the white phosphorus, he said, voice calm and casual, as if he were ordering tea. He turned sharply on his heel and walked away. Gray's breath caught in his throat. The larger man sneered as he stepped forward, clearly pleased to carry out the order. With brutal efficiency, he ripped away Gray's shirt, an old threadbare thing he had thrown on before bed, and then tore off the pajama pants printed with ridiculous little geese, a gag gift from Headmaster Wilbeck for his birthday. The floor was freezing against Gray's bare skin, and the sense of vulnerability hit harder than the cold. Whatever this was, it wasn't about interrogation anymore. It was about control, humiliation, and pain. I believe you have some information that we need. Fortunately for you, this means that we need you alive, for now. The thinner man came back, wearing gloves. In his hands was a small metal tube. If you're truly who we suspect you are, then you might have prepared for this. If by some wild chance we've made an error and everything that we considered as evidence was simply coincidence, then, well, this will be an incredibly uncomfortable experience for you. What? What are you talking about? Gray rasped, his head still pounding from the earlier blow. The edges of the room swam in and out of focus, everything distorted by the lingering haze of concussion. This will be easy, the thin man said with eerie cheer, smiling faintly as he dipped a gloved finger into a small metal tube. I won't even ask you any questions yet. He smeared a gleaming silver line just beneath Gray's ribs, the paste cold and oily against his skin. Then, without warning, he retrieved a small lighter and flicked it to life. Wait, what are you doing? Please. Gray's voice cracked, panic flooding his chest even before his mind could catch up to what was happening. The man didn't respond. He simply pressed the flickering flame to the silver smear. The reaction was instant. Agony unlike anything Gray had ever imagined ripped through his body as the substance ignited. The pain wasn't like a normal burn. It was something deeper, something primal, like his very nerves were being devoured from the inside out. His scream erupted raw and uncontrolled, echoing off the cold walls as his body convulsed against the restraints. He'd been burned before. Training accidents, magical backlash, even a lightning talisman once gone wrong. But this was something else entirely. The earlier burns now felt like warm water by comparison. The seconds dragged, stretched into eternities. The pain didn't dull, it grew, like it was feeding on his resistance. His throat gave out long before the fire did. His screams turned hoarse, then silent. Tears poured freely down his face until they too ran dry. All that remained was a scorched silence, filled only by the crackling sound of chemical fire and the faint smile of the man who had lit it. Finally, the pain began to subside, only for the thin man, the demon, to apply another line of the silver paste on a different part of Gray's body. Please, he wept. Don't do this. The man silently lit another hellish fire on his body. Gray screamed, and when his voice gave out, his mind screamed on. Every part of his body spasmed and twitched, his muscles and nerves unable to process the input they were receiving. His thoughts turned from the question of whether he was about to die to the hope that he would die soon, if only to relieve the pain. He couldn't tell how many times the demon stood before him holding that wretched silver paste, but this time, he didn't immediately smear his body again. Gray's wide, wild eyes met his dispassionate gaze. He jumped at the chance. If it meant that he would be free of the pain, he would do anything. I'll tell you whatever you want. Anything. Everything, he pleaded, his voice barely a whisper. That's better, the man said, his face again twisting into an awful imitation of a smile. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story, and you're going to help fill in the gaps for me. Any attempts at lying or withholding any truths will unfortunately lead me to put this in places more sensitive. Am I clear? The thin demon held up the container of white phosphorus and waved it in front of him. Without even the necessary saliva to swallow, Gray could only nod. Your name is Gray, the thin man continued, his voice calm, almost conversational. Background checks confirm you're an orphan. One headmaster, Olivia Wilbeck, oversaw your care since infancy, and the orphanage was what you considered home. Am I on track so far, Gray? Gray nodded again, slower this time. Bring the boy a glass of water, the man said, sounding faintly pleased with Gray's compliance. The scarred brute stepped forward and pressed a dirty, cloudy cup to Gray's lips. The water tasted foul, like it had been filtered through wet fur. But it was cool, and against his cracked lips and burning throat, it was relief incarnate. He swallowed greedily, only for the cup to be yanked away before he could take more than a couple of mouthfuls. Gray instinctively craned his neck toward the cup, but the larger man merely laughed, his scarred face twisting into a cruel grin. Moving on, the thin man said, his tone still smooth. And this is where I was hoping you'd start filling in the gaps. He leaned forward slightly, as if expecting honesty, now that he'd dangled the smallest kindness. What military institution trained you to be the legacy's protector? He asked. Because there's nothing in the official records. As if Gray had a choice. Gray furrowed his brows, genuinely bewildered. I've only barely finished my second year at Vitholm Military Academy. I've had no prior training, not before that. The thin man's voice dipped, suddenly razor sharp. So you're telling me that you managed to defeat 2 skilled Kai-enhanced combatants without any formal training whatsoever? I had help from my friends, Gray replied, forcing a steadiness he didn't feel. But yes, that's what happened. The man's mouth curled, not quite a smile, more like the tightening of a noose. And you expect me to believe that Olivia Wilbeck, that calculating shrew, just let the legacy waltz around in public with two ordinary children? No guards? No cover? Nothing? I don't know what this legacy is, Gray shouted, voice cracking under the strain. I've never heard of it in my life. The room went still. The thin man stared at him in silence, unmoving. The shadows under his eyes seemed to deepen. Finally, in a voice soft but laced with venom, he said, There are just two things I really want to know, Gray. What organization sent you to protect the legacy? And to what extent is the country of Traden aiding you in the legacy by publicly announcing Lady Vera as your mentor? Gray's mind spun wildly, empty of answers, his thoughts grasping at shadows. He had no idea what organization the man was referring to, or what the country of Traden had to do with any so-called legacy. The words felt foreign, meaningless to him. Before he could croak out even a denial, the thin man let out a long, disappointed sigh. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and slowly walked forward, each footstep measured, deliberate. I really hoped you'd stay true to your word and cooperate, he said, his tone eerily calm. But when you hesitate like this, Gray, I can only assume you're trying to make up an answer. He dipped his gloved fingers back into the accursed metal tube and smeared a fresh line of the silver paste, this time along the inside of Gray's left thigh. Please, Gray sobbed, fresh tears spilling freely down his raw cheeks. I don't know. The man didn't even blink. He lit the paste. Hellfire erupted across the sensitive flesh of Gray's inner thigh. The heat spread fast, far too fast, reaching up into his groin, setting his stomach twisting in revolt and sending his vision spinning. He writhed violently in the chair, but there was nowhere to run, no way to shield himself from the blaze. His mouth was open, screaming, but he wasn't sure if any sound was coming out. His ears rang with a high, unrelenting whine. His sense of time fractured, every second a razor drawn across his nerves. He prayed to lose consciousness. But his body, cursed with endurance, kept him painfully awake, kept him present for every blistering, torturous moment. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst moments were the silent ones, when the thin demon would wordlessly approach and ignite another piece of Gray's body without warning, without questions, without giving him anything to brace against. Each time the man stepped forward, Gray found himself caught in a tormenting limbo, paralyzed with dread, yet desperate for him to speak, to ask something, anything. Because even a question meant a chance to answer, meant a chance to avoid more of the fire. Time had lost all meaning. Whether it had been minutes or hours, Gray couldn't tell. Inside the dark, windowless room, only the constant blinding light aimed directly at his face remained unchanged, stripping the walls of detail, leaving him nothing to focus on. No distraction, no mercy. He was slipping. Thought and pain were merging into one indistinguishable blur. Then, footsteps. Distinct, approaching. Gray's broken instincts surged awake. He tried to lift his head, to beg, to plead. But something was different. These steps weren't like the others. Then, what the... The large man let out a grunt and collapsed beside him, dropping like a felled tree. A blur, someone fast, had struck him down in an instant. The thin man spun, reaching for something unseen. But before he could even react, he was launched across the room by a force so sudden it sent his body skidding into the far wall with a sickening thud. The blinding light switched off. Darkness swept over Gray like a wave, but his eyes were too damaged to appreciate the relief. White splotches danced in his vision, spots flickering across the dim room as he blinked hard, again and again, struggling to see, until finally through the haze, a face emerged. A figure knelt beside him. "You're safe now, kid," the voice said softly. It was Lady Vera. If you're enjoying this series, please give the video a like. It really helps others discover it. And if you'd like to see more, consider subscribing to the channel. Want the next chapter? Comment next chapter below. The wind tore past Art in powerful gales as he soared high above the clouds. Reaching the white core stage had come with a multitude of advantages, and the ability to manipulate ambient mana well enough to maintain flight was among the most liberating. If he had attempted this while still in the silver stage, he would have drained his core within minutes. Now, it was the mana around him, vast and ever-present, that lifted him into the sky, and the sensation was nothing short of surreal. Exhilarating as it was, however, Art's mind wasn't entirely at ease. Thoughts from the night before swirled in his head like a second current beneath the wind. He assumed that interrogating the Alacrian had triggered that unwanted memory, another vivid flash from his previous life. But with how frequently those memories had been surfacing lately, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Frustration, too. Still, he reminded himself of the vow he'd made upon being reborn into this world, that he would not live the same life as before. Until he understood why these memories were returning, he chose to treat them as reminders, lessons burned into his soul from a life of failure. Besides, it wasn't as if he could just go find a therapist. The image made him smirk, himself, reclined on a plush couch, pouring out his woes to a sharp-eyed professional scribbling notes on a clipboard. But when he glanced back toward the distant canopy of Elshire Forest, his smile faded. A twinge of guilt stirred in his gut for having left the survivors so abruptly. Art reassured himself that Lena and her soldiers were better off with General Aya, who could actually navigate the forest with precision. After meeting up with the Elven Lance, they had exchanged detailed reports of their findings. It had been decided that Art would return to the castle to report directly, while Aya remained behind to provide support until further orders came from the council. What they hadn't decided on, however, was whether Art could take a slight detour before heading back. So he did. He had at least sent a brief report through a transmission scroll that Lena had carried, informing Virion of his altered course. The scroll will give them enough to work with, Art thought, his eyes fixed on the jagged, snow-covered peaks of the Grand Mountains as they pierced the cloud line like ancient frozen blades. And the information I learned from the Alacrian will be more useful here anyway. Even at that altitude, he could hear the distant echoes of battle. The air carried with it a chorus of muffled explosions, the low hum of magic discharges, and the cries of indistinct beasts, all tangled with the screams and shouts of those locked in combat below. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. War never stayed quiet for long. Art felt a nervous tension he couldn't quite place. The lances seldom came to the wall since no retainers or scythes had been sighted there yet. The daily battles at the wall were usually fought by mages and soldiers against corrupted beasts, mindless creatures attempting to break through the defenses. He had pored over numerous reports from the wall and even suggested adjustments to their battle formations. Yet this was the first time he had been there in person, despite the near-daily conflicts. Below him, the relentless war had hardened many fresh recruits into seasoned soldiers, if they survived that long. Most importantly, this was where Tess and her unit were stationed. They were part of the assault division tasked with infiltrating dungeons, eradicating corrupted beasts, and disabling teleportation gates. Each gate destroyed meant preventing thousands of Alacrian troops from teleporting into Dicathan. Reaching the Grand Mountains, Art slowly descended through the sea of clouds until he had a full aerial view of the battle raging below. Streams and bolts of magic in a spectrum of colors rained down from the wall, while soldiers fought fiercely against hordes of beasts that had survived the bombardment. Some of the stronger beasts retaliated with magical attacks of their own, but few had been sent to the front lines, and their power was insignificant compared to the combined force of all the mages defending the wall. As Art continued his descent toward the wall, carefully studying the various types of beasts on the battlefield, he suddenly sensed a spell hurtling toward him from behind. Glancing over his shoulder, he spotted a blast of fire, as large as his entire body, shooting straight at him. Annoyed, He casually swatted the spell away, dispersing it with ease before completing his descent to the upper levels of the wall. Softening his landing with a cushion of wind, Art found himself looking upon a crowd of kneeling soldiers. Closest to him was a barrel-chested man, clad in full armor, dented and stained from battle. He knelt a few feet ahead, one hand pressing down firmly on the head of a young man who looked only a few years older than Art himself. "General, my sincerest apologies for my subordinate's grave blunder. Since we had received no word that a lance would be visiting the wall, he assumed you to be an enemy. I will reprimand the fool and ensure he is punished immediately," the man said. His voice was quiet, but carried a commanding presence, revealing him as a seasoned veteran just as clearly as his battered armor. Art tore his gaze away from the man, presumed to be the leader, and looked down at the trembling boy whose head remained forcibly bowed. The young soldier's white-knuckled grip tightened around his staff. Art mused that it had been a while since he'd been treated with such deference, briefly savoring the sight of so many heads bowed in respect and likely fear. That thought quickly soured, however, and a weariness settled over him from all the bowing and scraping. He cleared his throat and strode toward the man who had spoken. "No need. I come unannounced and from the Beast Glades, so I can understand how your subordinate mistook me for an enemy." Pausing, Art bent down to level his gaze with the conjurer who had fired the spell. "But next time you spot an unidentified potential threat, you should notify your superiors immediately so they can make the judgment call. Understood?" "Ununderstood, General," the young man stammered, snapping to attention and nearly clipping Art's chin with his salute. Turning back to the presumed leader, Art winked and said, "Name and position," before walking past him toward the stairs. "Captain Albanth Kelrus of the Bulwark Division," the man called, quickly falling in step behind him. "Very well, Captain Albanth Kelrus. Let's talk strategy." As Art continued descending the spiraling stone stairs, his senses were flooded by the sheer magnitude of life within the wall. Despite its austere name, the wall was less a barrier and more a self-contained war engine, a fortress city carved into the spine of Dicathan's defense. Each level buzzed with relentless purpose. The upper tiers were stark and fortified, occupied mostly by maintenance crews and long-range units. Reinforced stone blocks, some still cracked from the previous night's assault, were being sealed with frost, while dwarven metalworkers hammered glowing beams into place. Even in the middle of a war, the craftsmanship never ceased. Adjacent to the stairwells, pulley systems groaned under the weight of supply crates, bundles of arrows, and fresh water barrels, all ascending and descending with mechanical rhythm. Teams of conjurers stood by the embrasures, narrow slits in the outer wall, rotating in shifts to keep their elemental volleys raining down on whatever creatures dared test the stronghold's defenses. Amid the chaos, the clang of tools and shouted orders interwove with the distant boom of magic and the faint cries of beasts, creating a thunderous harmony of labor and war. "Please excuse the noise, General," Captain Albanth said, raising his voice to be heard over the cacophony. "I've been told it's quite overwhelming for those who aren't used to it." "Overwhelming indeed," Art admitted, pausing briefly to take it all in. "I regret not coming here sooner. This place is incredible." "Aye," Albanth said with a small, proud smile, returning the salutes of several passing workers. "It's quite the marvel, and it has to be." They continued their descent until reaching a sturdy gate flanked by 2 armored soldiers standing at attention. "The floors beyond this point are open to civilians as well," Albanth explained, pulling out a small insignia and flashing it at the guards. "Captain!" Both guards saluted crisply, though their eyes lingered on Art, filled with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Albanth's tone sharpened instantly. "Fools! Were you taught to gawk in the presence of a lance?" The color drained from their faces as their expressions shifted to alarm. "General!" they exclaimed in unison, hurriedly bowing. Albanth scratched the back of his neck, glancing sidelong at Art. "My apologies, General. Most of the soldiers stationed at the wall have never actually seen one of the lances in person." "It's fine," Art said, offering the guards a reassuring smile. A salute will do. Yes, sir, said the guard on the right, snapping back upright. His partner followed suit, a wide, starstruck grin spreading across his face. It's an honor to meet one of the famed lances. Just open the gates, Albanth muttered with a sigh, shaking his head as the metal doors creaked open. The guards scrambled to unclasp the heavy metal bolts, and the great iron doors groaned open, allowing Art and Albanth to continue their descent deeper into the heart of the wall. By the next floor, Art was already sweating. His eyes stung and his throat felt raw, the acrid sting of heat and smoke biting into his lungs with every breath. A bead of sweat traced down his cheek, and he instinctively pulled his collar higher to shield his nose. Is there a fire somewhere? He asked, squinting against the thick haze. In a way, yes, Albanth replied, loosening the gorget around his neck to let the hot air escape. We're near the main forge. Another flight of stairs brought them into the depths of the smithing level, and the forge exploded into view. The space opened wide, deeper and broader than any chamber so far. Dozens of forges lined the walls, each surrounded by teams of blacksmiths, apprentices, and mana-specialized workers. The smoke, though guided through narrow vents in the ceiling, hung thick in the air, turning the flicker of firelight into a hazy orange gloom. The heat was oppressive. It poured from the glowing mouths of the forges in waves, making the very air ripple. Sparks danced like fireflies with each strike of hammer on steel. Despite the suffocating atmosphere, the operation was meticulously coordinated. Runners ferried glowing blades from one station to another. Dwarves shouted out measurements and enchantment levels, while mages channeled spells directly into the cooling tanks and refinement chambers. Art's eyes roved across the forge floor, his mind briefly slipping into the past. While the blacksmithing of his old world had become obsolete in the age of industry, there was something more refined, almost mechanical, in the way this place operated. Despite its archaic setting, the forge was no crude workshop. Some of the devices being used, mana-powered furnaces, vibrational chisels, arcane molders, were surprisingly intricate, even rivaling some of the automation he remembered from his previous life. It's like a living machine, he muttered to himself, watching as another finished blade was lifted, glowing orange, to be quenched. Aye, Albanth said proudly. Every lance officer and elite soldier wears something that passed through this forge, including you. Art watched intently as two smiths took turns working a glowing bar of heated metal beneath a massive wedge-shaped hammer. The device towered over them, its iron frame pulsing with rhythmic bone-shaking impacts as it drove into the metal. It reminded Art of a steam-driven power hammer from his previous life, yet there were no pistons, no boilers, no pipes, just pure force. Curious, he stepped around the side of the structure. Behind it stood a bare-chested mage, his arms outstretched, veins bulging as he manipulated a massive counterweight with gravity magic. With each controlled rise and fall of the weight, the hammer slammed down with precision. Before Art could lose himself in the machinery, Albanth's voice called out above the din. Please bear with the heat just a bit longer, General. We're almost there. Art gave a nod and turned his gaze forward, though his eyes caught yet another display of craftsmanship, this time from a group of dwarven metal mages. Each of them hunched over an anvil, palms glowing as they coaxed metal ingots to twist and stretch like softened clay. There was no hammering here, only the quiet, focused hum of mana bending the metal to its master's will. It was surreal. Further down, the air shifted. Though the heat still pressed down on him, it was accompanied now by the buzz of conversation and clinking coin. Art's brows lifted slightly as the forge level opened into a bustling corridor where vendors sold supplies, repair services, and food. Worn-looking adventurers chatted with merchants over crates of ore and weapon parts. Even a few robed conjurers and beast tamers were exchanging mana crystals for talismans and runes. There's an entirely separate economy here, Art murmured, mostly to himself. Absolutely, Albanth agreed, wiping sweat from his face with his gloves. Since there's no law mandating service in the war, We offer rewards to adventurers who spend time out in the field. It's easy money for them, and it ensures a steady supply of able-bodied mages and fighters. There's occasional tension between the soldiers and adventurers, but everyone gets enough fighting to keep that from turning violent. And the merchants are here because of the adventurers? Art asked, surveying the rows of stalls and tents on the ground floor. Yes, sir. They're restricted from operating on the main supply routes and taxed heavily for doing business here, but they still come in droves. Albanth chuckled. Always eager to make a coin. Without them, we'd suddenly have to worry about food, clothing, weapons, and entertainment for thousands of mercenaries. We pay the adventurers spend their hard-earned coin with the merchants, and we collect taxes to pay the adventurers. Everyone earns a living, and we all share a stake in the defense of the wall. Brilliant, Art echoed, nodding to a pair of guards who bowed deeply as they passed. The resourceful use of available pieces spoke volumes about the senior captain overseeing the sprawling, city-like complex. Albanth led the way with practiced ease, weaving through the crowd on the ground floor as people instinctively parted before them. Flying down would have been much faster, but I hope this tour helped you get familiar with the wall. I appreciate it, Captain Albanth, Art replied. The captain smiled, his crow's feet deepening. They walked for several more minutes until they reached a quieter area. An unusually large canvas pavilion stood out against the mountainside, several mages stationed vigilantly around it. Albanth gestured toward the pavilion. This is where the captains and heads hold their meetings. You've arrived at a good time. There's a meeting going on right now. I was just about to head down as you arrived. I'm glad I got here when I did then, despite the fireball, Art replied. It's constant excitement around here, I'll tell you that. Albanth chuckled, flashing his badge once again at the guards. Senior Captain Trotius is inside, along with the other captains and several heads. Trotius? Art thought, vaguely recognizing the name from somewhere. The guards opened the flap, and Art followed Albanth inside. The interior was dominated by a large round table covered with a detailed map of what looked like the Beast Glades. On the map, several wooden figures, each shaped differently, indicated various positions of dungeons and troops. 7 people were seated around the table, all clad in battered armor and disheveled robes, leaning over the map in the midst of a discussion. At the far end of the circular table sat a man who embodied the perfect image of a traditional gentleman. Handsome, with shiny black hair meticulously cropped, his uniform impeccably kept, as if tailored that very morning. His eyes were sharp and deep-set, his irises glowing faintly with a hint of red. The man stopped mid-sentence upon noticing their arrival and rose to his feet. He dipped his head toward Art. General Arthur Leywin. Upon hearing Art's title, the others rose and bowed as well. Captain Albanth saluted. My apologies for being late. Given the nature of your arrival, it is of no consequence, the man replied, his expression unreadable. Please, have a seat and allow me to introduce myself. I am Trotius Flamesworth, senior captain in charge of the wall. Currently, there are 5 units in this region and another 3 farther east, based on their last transmissions, reported the captain of the Trailblazer Division, her finger pointing precisely to the markers on the map. Jasmia Kruer, captain of Tessia's unit, moved and spoke with a natural grace, her voice clear and steady. Yet there was a fierceness in the way she held herself, one hand always resting on the pommel of her saber, as though ready to strike at a moment's notice. Art had expected the captain leading the Trailblazer division into the treacherous wilds of the Beast Glades to be formidable, but Jasmia looked like she could scare off mana beasts with a single glare. Trotius shifted his attention from the map to the sheet of paper in his hands. Captain Jasmia, the log sheets for clearing the dungeons. How accurate is this timeline? Captain Jasmia straightened her back before speaking. Fairly accurate, taking into account. A week is too long, the senior captain interrupted flatly. The number of corrupted beasts attacking the wall continues to grow. 4 days for each dungeon. That's all we can allow. But sir, Jasmia shot up from her seat. Rushing the expeditions to that degree will cause significantly more casualties. Some of these dungeons have never been cleared before. Extreme caution has to be taken or an entire unit could be wiped out. That is an order, Captain Jasmia Kruer, the senior captain said firmly. The wall is the last line of defense on the eastern border. If a soldier from your unit dies out in the Beast Glades, that soldier's family isn't in danger. But if the number of beasts grows beyond what this fort can handle, many more lives will be lost here. And those monsters, along with the Alacrian mages controlling them, will move on unimpeded to the nearby towns. Captain Jasmia's expression was even more severe as she returned to her seat, her jaw tight and her gaze fixed ahead. Captain Albanth, seated closest to her, cast a wary glance at her sword hand, which remained firmly gripping the pommel of her weapon. Art had learned that most of Albanth's division was made up of workers and blacksmiths tasked with maintaining and expanding the wall. His report was brief but thorough, listing recent repairs, the consumption of key resources, and supplies that would soon need restocking. Art remained silent as the two captains delivered their updates to Trotius. Occasionally, other unit heads at the table chimed in to elaborate when prompted, offering further detail as needed. Trotius eventually looked up from his notes. And what is the progress on the new routes for our Trailblazer division? We've just finished securing the 4th tunnel, Albanth replied. It's the longest one yet, and the entrance is hidden in a small crevice along a riverbank. A team of Earth mages is still reinforcing the tunnel, but it should be accessible to units within the week. He traced a rough path across the table with his fingers to show the tunnel's layout. Pull back a 1/4 of the workers and have them work nights instead, Trotius instructed without looking up. We were forced to flood another route just last week because its location had been compromised. Securing more underground routes is the priority. He then turned his attention back to Captain Jasmia. Are there any new updates on finding transportation gates? Jasmia shook her head. We've only assigned a single unit to scout for gates. I'll need more time. Teleportation gates? Art asked, his interest sharpening. Yes, Trotius replied, his crimson eyes shifting toward him. With the wall under constant attack, our safest means of access to the Beast Glades is through our underground channels. However, with a new mode of transport currently under construction, a train, I believe they're calling it, connecting the wall to Black Bend City, we'll soon have easier access to the city's teleportation gate. If we can locate and connect that gate to any hidden within the Beast Glades, we'll be able to move troops instantly. No more hours of marching through narrow tunnels. Art's eyes locked onto the map. How are you certain that there are any teleportation gates in the Beast Glades? We're not, Trotius replied matter-of-factly, which is why we're only allocating a limited amount of resources to the search. Several ancient texts reference gates hidden within the glades, but whether or not that's true remains a mystery. Teleportation gates had always been a point of fascination for Art. Like the floating castle and Zyrus City, they were relics left behind by the mages of old, evidence of an era when magic had been used in ways the strongest mages of the present couldn't even begin to replicate. The stone arches, etched with ancient and indecipherable runes, appeared relic-like, yet entire cities had been constructed around them, relying on them as essential hubs of transportation. While modern artificers had figured out how to link teleportation gates together and modify their destinations, the knowledge required to create one from scratch remained far beyond reach. What method is the unit using to track down the gates? Art asked, assuming you're not just having them blindly wander the wilderness. A faint smile tugged at the corners of Trotius Flamesworth's lips. I prefer not to waste even the smallest resources on something so uncertain. The gates constantly emit a faint fluctuation of mana particles. Under normal circumstances, it would be undetectable, even to the most skilled trackers. But these fluctuations span the entire elemental spectrum. Interesting, Art murmured, recalling the time he had tried tracking mana anomalies in Darv. It had been difficult, mostly because he'd searched blindly through ambient mana using Realm Heart. But if the fluctuations truly echoed across all elemental wavelengths, locating them would simply be a matter of flying over the entire beast glades. Never mind, he thought. A waste of time, considering there might not even be any gates. Art's thoughts were interrupted by Trotius, who began tidying his notes. The senior captain took his time, meticulously stacking and aligning each sheet of paper before finally meeting Art's gaze. "My apologies for your having to sit through this meeting," he said. Trotius stood, motioning for the others in the room to leave, but Art raised a hand to stop him. "It'll be better for them to hear this as well," he said, remaining seated. It didn't take long to explain what he had learned from interrogating the Alacrian. By supplementing the boy's answers with fragments of information he had uncovered from Uto's memories, Art was able to present a detailed analysis of Alacrian troop movement and internal structure. Even Captain Jesmia, who had hardly looked away from her saber the entire meeting, was now hunched over a scrap of parchment, furiously scribbling down notes. "Intriguing," Trotius mused. "General, you say that the Alacrian mages have a very limited, specialized form of magic manipulation, but what's stopping a striker, for example, from forming his mana into a ranged attack?" "It's as the senior captain says," Jesmia added, her tone sharp. "I can't pass this information down to my soldiers only for them to get injured, or worse, because a striker launched a ranged spell or a shield suddenly conjured a mana blade." "I'm not asking you to put blind faith in it," Art replied. "Inform only the unit heads and have them observe in the field. Our enemies use magic differently, structured, rigid, but that doesn't make it superior. Study them, find the cracks, exploit them. The Council will be expecting detailed reports based on first-hand encounters, especially concerning these limitations." The Council wasn't yet aware of this information, but they would be soon, and they would undoubtedly demand reports in return. Art then explained everything he knew about marks, crests, emblems, and regalias. "Hopefully this information can give us an edge in the upcoming battles, assuming we can confirm its validity." He stood. "That'll be all." He took his leave, not wanting to stay any longer than necessary. Throughout the meeting, he had watched Trotius Flamesworth closely. After hearing Jasmine's story of how the Flamesworth family had discarded her, Art couldn't help but feel resentment toward them. He had come to know Hester, Jasmine's aunt, fairly well during his training at the castle, which had softened some of his negativity toward the family as a whole. But learning about the relationship between Jasmine and her father from Hester had focused his animosity squarely on Trotius. Still, after meeting Trotius today, all Art felt was wary callousness. In the end, Art had come here as a lance, not as Jasmine's friend. Trotius might be a piss-poor father and cold-hearted to some degree, but his leadership was solid. After the quiet of the meeting pavilion, the wall felt especially loud and busy. The ground wasn't paved, so a fine cloud of sand and dust constantly swirled in the air. Workers, caked in dirt and grime, mingled with merchants and adventurers, some still holding shovels or pickaxes after being relieved from their shifts. Vendors shouted from tents and carts, advertising their goods as laborers, adventurers, and soldiers filtered through. Most were selling food and equipment useful for a life of constant conflict, but many others offered different wares: silversmiths, gem cutters, potters, painters, sculptors, tailors, and more. Families lived in the makeshift city, and the stress of dwelling so close to the battle against the corrupted beasts flooding from the beast glades fueled their craving for whatever creature comforts they could afford. As if to emphasize the thought, a monstrous roar cut through the clamor of the market and the wall, followed by a series of explosions. A brief lull fell over the noise as every head turned toward the wall. Art blinked, and the moment passed. "Oi, lad, your shoes look mighty thin for someone in these parts," a burly man in a leather apron called out. "Might I interest you in a pair of fine leather boots for your poor feet?" The man waved his arm toward an array of leather footwear displayed on wooden racks. Feigning interest, Art leaned forward and touched a few boots that looked to be his size. "Those ones all have a layer of compressed wool inside," the man said eagerly. "I swear, you'll feel like you're walking on a cloud." Curious, Art slipped out of his thin turn shoes and pulled on a pair of the merchant's boots. He hopped a few times before taking them off. Placing them back on the rack, he gave the merchant a grin. "I've walked on a cloud before, and this wasn't quite the same. Nice shoes, though." Walking through the busy streets of the fortress felt somewhat surreal. Dressed in a simple loose robe and carrying no weapon, very few people recognized him, allowing Art to explore without drawing attention. Life here demanded a certain stoicism from its residents. Even in the market, a subtle tension lurked beneath the surface. He noticed it in the laborers' hurried steps and downcast eyes, in the brief, business-like exchanges between merchants and adventurers, but most of all, in the way everyone pretended they weren't afraid. Chewing on a skewer of charbroiled meat that had the texture of chicken thigh, Art stopped at every stall that caught his interest. Some offered mundane goods like cloth, furs, spices, and alcohol, which was unsurprisingly popular with the overworked soldiers and laborers. But there were more intriguing wares as well. A thin, mustachioed man was selling enchanted armor and weapons. Another merchant tried hard to persuade Art to buy an enchanted handle that shot out blasts of fire and smoke from a small nozzle, mainly used for self-defense by weaker nobles. The man finally gave up when Art conjured a small sphere of fire from his finger, close enough to singe the merchant's bangs, and gave him a wink. As the sun began to set, Art was considering his next move when a deep horn sounded in the distance. The horn came from beyond a large metal gate, nearly 20 feet tall. "I wonder what's happening," he thought, just as another horn blew. Several uniformed workers marched toward the gate, and Art followed them. Chains rattled behind the stones as the gate groaned open, clearing the way. A crowd had already gathered around the gate as carriages pulled by mana beasts began filing in, with mages and warriors walking beside them, weapons unsheathed. Their exhaustion was clear in their postures and expressions, but the workers took over, slowly unloading crates from the carriages. Art stepped forward for a better look when, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted his father. Art had known there was a chance he might run into his parents at the wall. He had even anticipated it to some extent. But when he saw his father step down and offer a hand to help his mother out of the carriage, he froze in place. His feet stayed rooted as more familiar faces appeared behind them. Jasmine, Helen, Durden, and Angela emerged one by one. The entire Twin Horns party still looked the same, yet something about them felt incomplete without Adam. All of them, his parents and the rest of the team, wore the same weary, grim expressions that matched their worn and dirt-streaked appearances as they moved alongside their carriage. "Close the gates," a soldier bellowed, and the massive doors groaned shut behind the last of the convoy. More workers flooded the area to begin unloading. Some unhitched the mana beasts from the carriages and led them away, while others lined up to pass boxes of supplies down an organized chain for sorting. One soldier holding a notebook stopped at the front carriage and began speaking to the driver. Art, quietly imbuing mana into his ears, had no trouble picking out their conversation through the surrounding noise. "There are 2 fewer carriages than what was reported to have left from Blackbend," the soldier said gruffly. "We ran into a small team of Alacrian mages just a mile north of the southern border," the driver replied, removing his dented and scraped helmet. "Lost 2 of my carriages to those bastards." The guard glanced past the wiry driver, studying the remaining carriages, then let out a sharp breath. "After the carriages are unloaded and your men accounted for, report to the main tent. You'll need to do a full debrief." The driver didn't respond. He was already stripping off layers of battered armor and dropping them to the ground before heading back to his carriage. Art was struck by how casually the man had spoken about being attacked. He had expected the Twin Horns guard duty to be relatively uneventful, but clearly, even transport missions weren't safe anymore. Without hesitation, Art pushed through the crowd, effortlessly brushing aside men twice his size as he made his way toward his parents. His heart gave a small jolt as his eyes met theirs. Though they had reconciled, things between them no longer carried the same innocent ease they once had. His mother's mouth parted in surprise, her weathered features softening into a smile. "Arthur," his father called, letting the sack on his shoulder fall to the ground. Art smiled back. "Hi, Mom. Hey, Dad." His father wrapped thick arms around him and lifted him clean off the ground. Art let out a breathless chuckle before being set down, only to be pulled into another embrace, this time by his mother. "It's good to see you're doing well," she whispered, her face pressed against his chest. She was covered in a thin layer of dust, likely hadn't had a proper bath in days, but beneath it all, she still smelled like something familiar. Something that felt like home. The Twin Horns closed in next, unable to hold back any longer. Durden shrugged off his filthy cloak before hugging him. Helen and Angela wrapped him up tightly, both of them remarking on how much he'd grown, in the way doting aunts always did. "You got bigger," Jasmine muttered, a half-smile tugging at her lips as she ruffled his hair. "Are you sure you didn't just get smaller?" Art teased, pulling her into a hug. As he let her go, he turned, expecting one more familiar face to join in. But the moment never came. That's when it hit him. Adam was really gone. The rude, abrasive, and often selfish spear wielder of the Twin Horns would never walk up grinning with that familiar snide smile again. Gritting his teeth, Art forced another smile and turned back toward the others. Together, they left the noise of the workers and carriages behind, making their way toward the nearest inn. They found a large, weathered building a few blocks away, a decrepit old house with the audacity to brand itself as the most popular inn for miles. Despite its rundown appearance, the place was bustling. As both a restaurant and bar, it was packed with workers and soldiers eager for a hot meal or stiff drink, and shelter from the biting cold that worsened with the falling night. It's a lance, in the flesh, here at my inn, oh my." The innkeeper, who also worked the front desk, practically vibrated with excitement as he scrambled to shake Art's hand, fill out the paperwork, and summon a waiter, all at once. "I'm just looking for a quiet dinner and a room for my family and friends," Art said with a calm smile. "Of course, General Arthur. Jives, clear the patio seats upstairs. Hurry," the old man barked at a stunned waiter. Helen nudged him playfully. "Looks like there are some benefits to knowing you after all." Durden glanced toward the long line of patrons still waiting for seats. "We probably would have been out here for a good while otherwise." They were led up a flight of spiraling stairs to a balcony that overlooked the opposite side of the wall. Even here, the makeshift city was enclosed by high curtain walls that obscured any real view of the outside world. But from this angle, Art could still watch the bustling movement of people below. A metal furnace crackled softly beside their table, radiating warmth into the cool evening air. Plates of warm bread and steaming broth were already laid out as starters. "How have you been, Arthur?" his mother asked gently once they'd settled around the table. "I've been good," he lied. "It wasn't that simple. Too much had happened since they'd last seen each other. Things that couldn't be captured in a sentence, and things he didn't want them to worry about. His mother had aged noticeably. Life on the road, always shadowed by the threat of danger, had worn down the softness she'd once carried during their peaceful days in Xyrus. His father still wore his hair short, but now a full beard covered most of his face. There were heavy bags under his eyes, yet his expression remained warm, his energy still intact. "I can't even feel your core anymore, Arthur," his father said with a hint of pride. "How strong have you gotten?" "I hit white core not too long ago," Art answered with a small smile. Helen let out a low whistle. Jasmine gave a slow, approving nod. His father smirked openly, glancing between Art and the rest of the twin horns. "My boy." As food arrived and the conversation carried on, some of the fatigue in their faces began to fade. His mother smiled more, gently scolding his father when he made a crude joke. Just like old times. They spoke of home, of travels, and eventually of Ellie. Art learned that his parents still made an effort to keep in touch with her. It wasn't as often as they'd like, but every time they passed through Black Bend City, they went out of their way to send a transmission to the castle. "Really?" Art asked, biting into a piece of grilled fish. Ellie never mentioned it. "She's in her rebellious phase," his father muttered around a mouthful of broth-soaked bread. "She just replies with, 'I'm okay,' or 'I'm alive,'" his mother added, her voice tinged with concern. "She's doing well, right? Eating properly? Making friends?" Art set his fork down. "If you're that worried, why don't you go visit the castle? I'm sure that's what Ellie wants." Security into the castle has tightened recently. Only heads and above have access to the teleportation gates there, and even they can only go on official business, Helen explained, dabbing her mouth with a cloth. "I can take you myself," Art offered. "Sylvie's not with me to fly us directly, but we can go to Black Bend together and make the jump to the castle." His parents exchanged a look before his mother turned back to him with a reassuring smile. "A new mode of transportation is going to be built underground. Once that's finished, we'll be able to visit you and Ellie much more often." "That's good and all," Art said, his tone tight, "but I've heard reports that the journey from Black Bend is getting more and more dangerous. Ellie worries about you. I worry about you." His mother nodded softly. "I know, and I don't blame you for your worries or your frustration, but we have our duties here. There are people who need our help." "It's not only your burden," he said, his voice sharper than he meant it to be. "There are other soldiers who can take your place." A pause followed. Then, as if on cue, Angela sprang up suddenly. "Oh dear, Helen, we never took our belongings out of the carriage." Helen blinked, then her eyes widened. "You're right. Before someone walks off with them." She turned to Durden and Jasmine. "Come on, you two." Still confused, Durden followed after them, while Jasmine gave a small sigh and stood. Angela glanced back over her shoulder and gave Art a meaningful look before disappearing down the stairs. Whether the conjurer had left to avoid the tension or simply to give their family privacy, Art couldn't be sure, but he was grateful for the chance to speak with his parents alone. "Arthur," his mother said, breaking the silence gently, "our responsibilities here may not be on the same scale as yours as a lance, but we're still doing our part to win this war and send everyone home that much faster." "You're putting yourselves in danger," Art countered, his voice tight. "Everyone is in danger while Dickathan is at war," she replied. "Even you, Arthur." "Yes, but I can handle it," he snapped. Mana churned beneath his skin, rising to the surface like a wave he struggled to hold back. His father slammed his utensils onto the table. "Do you realize how hypocritical you're being?" he said, his tone sharp, like he was scolding a child. "So it's fine for you to put your life on the line, but not Ellie, not Alice, not me? Should we all just lock ourselves away and abandon our duties, let others carry the burden?" "I'm fighting this war to protect you," Art shot back, "but I can't be by your side all the time. What if something happens to you or Mom while I'm gone? What if something happens to Ellie?" His voice broke slightly. The reason she's been throwing herself into training is because she wants to fight beside me. What if she dies? Like Adam? Enough, Arthur, his father barked, rising to his feet, eyes blazing. Keeping this family safe is my priority too, but I want more than that. I want my family to live. That's why we're here. Dickathan might not be your only home anymore, but it's the only one we've ever known. If I have to die so that Ellie can live in a better world, then I will. Without waiting for a response, his father turned and stormed off. His mother hesitated, giving Art a long, heavy look, filled with sorrow, but also understanding, before quietly following. Art sat in silence for a long moment before rising from his seat. He reached into his robe, pulled out several gold coins, and left them on the table without a word. Then, with a quiet breath, he stepped off the balcony and flew into the night sky. His thoughts tangled, heavy with emotion. He ascended toward a rocky ledge high in the mountain adjacent to the fortress. From there, he looked down at the wall far below. The cold mountain wind bit at his skin, but he welcomed the sting. It was a fitting punishment for letting his frustration lash out at the people he loved most. He avoided replaying the conversation, not wanting to dwell on what he had said. Instead, he focused his attention outward. Part of him longed to unleash his mana on a corrupted beast, to release everything he was holding inside. But the night was quiet. Enhancing his vision with mana, he began counting the torches that lined the wall and the number of archers and mages standing guard above it. Anything to distract his mind. He deliberately ignored the two soldiers behind a wooden pillbox, clearly wrapped up in something more intimate. They likely hadn't expected an audience from above. When he ran out of things to count, he turned his gaze past the wall into the darkness beyond, searching for signs of movement, any flicker of mana that might betray a lurking beast. He sensed nothing. No enemies, no threats, only silence, until a flicker of familiar mana climbed into range. There, you are, a voice called faintly from below. A hand gripped the edge of the ledge, and a moment later, Art reached out and pulled Jasmine up by the arm. She leaned back against the cliff wall, catching her breath. "You should have some respect for those of us who can't fly," she said between gasps. Art offered a faint smile. "Sorry about that. How'd you find me?" Jasmine straightened, brushing back a lock of hair, one brow raised. "Don't underestimate your mentor." "I never have," Art said with a chuckle. The two of them sat quietly as a gust of wind swept over the ledge, carrying with it a thick cloud that blotted out the stars. "How long have you been at the wall?" Jasmine asked, shivering slightly. Art wrapped them both in a light veil of fire-imbued mana, enough to keep the cold at bay without scorching the surrounding stone. "Just a few hours before you all arrived." "Thank you," she muttered. Then, after a pause, her eyes lowered. "Did you get the chance to meet my father?" "I walked in on their meeting," he replied. "Have you seen him?" Jasmine shook her head. "Not once, despite the many trips back and forth." Her frown deepened as she looked over at him. "Looks like we both have family problems now." "Seems like it." Another beat of silence passed, filled only by the soft howl of wind brushing past the cliff face. "I won't pry into what happened at the inn," she said at last, her voice quieter. "But you should know. Your parents care about you, about Ellie. Every time your dad meets someone new, he tells them his son's a lance, how proud he is of you. Honestly, it's kind of annoying." Despite himself, Art smiled. "I know they care." Jasmine looked down at her boots. Ray, and especially Alice, they carry a lot of guilt. No matter what we told them, not being there when Adam died, They feel like it was their fault. Jasmine continued speaking when Art didn't reply. You know what happened with your mother before she had you. She was traumatized after Lenza, and for a while, she could hardly bring herself to use her magic for anything more than a scrape or bruise. I know, Art said, flicking a stone with mana and sending it arcing out into the darkness. Which is why I thought they would stay at the castle until the war was over, not throw themselves into the middle of the battle by traipsing back and forth through dangerous lands, fending off attacks and Jasmine put a hand on Art's arm. I'm not sure if this makes sense, but I think what they're doing now to contribute to this war is as much for themselves as it is for you and Ellie. They're trying to overcome their past mistakes and their fears so they can become better parents for the both of you. I know I was being selfish too, Art admitted. I think all three of us need some time to adjust. Just don't let your relationship with your parents become like me and my family, she said tersely. I'm sure there was a time when we could have reconciled, but I chose to keep running, and my father's pride kept him from reaching out, from apologizing. Art turned to Jasmine, who sat on the cold stone, hugging her knees. She hadn't aged a single day since they first met, except for her eyes, which now held a deep wisdom that contrasted sharply with her youthful face. Thanks, Jasmine, he said quietly. You better be thankful. My jaw's sore from all this talking, she replied with a tired grin. Despite her words, their conversation continued. They swapped war stories like grizzled veterans, Art sharing tales of his time with the Asuras and the true story of how he'd defeated the Vritra retainer, Jagret. Jasmine recounted the exploits of the Twin Horns. The highlight of the night was Jasmine's disbelieving look when Art mentioned Sylvie's new human form, though he wasn't convinced she fully believed him. Either way, they enjoyed each other's company well into the night. I should get back now, Jasmine said, as the first light of dawn cast a soft halo around the mountains. Need a lift down? She shook her head. Going down is the easy part. Thank you, Art said with a smile, for everything. She simply nodded and gave his head a gentle pat. Art watched as she hopped down the mountainside, a gust of wind cushioning each landing until she disappeared from sight. The castle loomed overhead, its towering spires stark against the heavy gray sky. Rain hadn't yet fallen, but the air was thick with moisture, clinging to Art's skin and soaking into his clothes. Dense water manna pooled all around him as he neared the base of the floating stronghold. Soldiers mounted on flying beasts closed in swiftly, forming a loose formation around him as he ascended. "General Arthur!" they called out, saluting in unison before falling into formation to escort him toward the landing dock. Art offered a terse nod in response, then descended. His feet touched the platform with a quiet thud, and his gaze instinctively flicked back toward the direction of the wall. But the distance was far too great. Nothing but endless sky met his eyes before the gates behind him rolled shut. Dock workers, who had been tending to runes and checking for faults in the castle's defensive wardings, immediately halted their tasks and stood at attention. "Proceed with what you were doing," Art said, motioning them off with a slight wave. Art continued walking, thin wisps of steam curling off his damp clothes as the warmth of his mana dried them. Then he saw them, and a smile broke across his face. Ellie stood tall, her chestnut eyes glowing with confidence. Her ash-brown hair, falling just past her shoulders, was an unshakable reminder of their father. Beside her was another girl, a little shorter and younger in appearance. Her glimmering yellow eyes held a calm, quiet maturity that belied her age. Pale, wheat-colored hair framed her slender figure, cascading down over a black dress that shimmered like polished obsidian. From the sides of her small head, two jagged horns curled outward, completing the image. Ellie waved, then broke into a trot, her steps light and quick as she made her way toward him, Sylvie close behind. His Bond's steps were hesitant at first, but even in the few days they'd been apart, her movements had become noticeably smoother. "Welcome back," Ellie said, eyeing him with mock annoyance. Seeing as how your entire body is drenched, let's just pretend like we hugged. No way, I want the real thing, Art replied with a grin, stepping forward and pulling her into a firm embrace. Gah, I just bathed, she protested, squirming in his arms as the dampness from his clothes soaked into hers. Satisfied only after properly drenching her, Art finally released her and turned to his bond. He reached out and tousled her pale hair, which had a strange, almost sharp texture beneath his fingers. I see that my fearsome dragon is growing up to be a healthy young girl, he teased. Despite his playful tone, Sylvie's golden eyes narrowed slightly as she looked up at him, quiet concern written across her face. We'll talk about it later, he sent, knowing she could sense the heaviness still clinging to him. Sylvie hesitated, then forced an awkward smile and gently patted his arm. Welcome back. It's good to be back, Art said to both of them. So, how was your mission? I want to hear everything, Ellie asked, practically bouncing on the balls of her feet. Art could see it in her eyes, the way she carried herself now, the eagerness in her voice. As she grew more adept in both magic and archery, her desire to prove herself on the battlefield had only intensified. I'll tell you all about it later, he promised, but first, I need to report to the council. With a subtle wave of heat mana, he dried the last of the moisture clinging to his clothes. Then, the three of them made their way out of the chamber, which had grown uncomfortably quiet in the wake of his arrival. I broke into the light red stage while you were gone, Ellie said proudly as they walked through the castle halls. That, and my daily training with Boo, probably makes me a pretty competent conjurer for my age. Even Commander Virion said I might be able to skip the mandatory soldier training. Every time Ellie spoke with such enthusiasm about joining the army, Art felt the urge to shut her down, to protect her from the reality of war. But this time, he simply offered a supportive smile and nodded, quietly acknowledging her progress with the most encouragement he could muster. Beside him, Sylvie walked in silence, her focus still fixed on the act of maintaining balance. Mana pulsed steadily from her small frame, a quiet reminder that she was still relying on magic to compensate for a body she hadn't yet mastered. Even so, her improvement since the last time he'd seen her, just days ago, was undeniable. Her steps were smoother, more confident, her posture less uncertain. She was pushing herself hard, and Art could feel the unspoken resolve behind each step. She was preparing herself, for him, and for the battlefield. You know, Princess Catherine has been really helpful too, Ellie said brightly, skipping a few steps ahead before turning to walk backward, facing Art as she spoke. She's been sparring with me and helping me out with some of the intricacies of mana manipulation. Oh, really? Art replied, amused. You know, I can always help teach you magic when I'm free. I was an official professor at Xyrus Academy after all. For like a semester, Ellie shot back with a smirk. He waved her off. A professor is a professor. Thanks for the offer, but I feel like learning from you would just discourage me. What? Art blinked, caught off guard. Why would you be discouraged? I know we're 5 years apart, but we still share the same blood, Ellie said, turning back around and walking normally. Seeing as how you're already a white core mage and a quadra elemental, I'd just end up comparing myself to you. Art's sister's words hit hard, but it was her tone of subdued acceptance that cut deepest. He found himself glancing at Sylvie, silently hoping she had a way to mend the awkwardness he had just caused. Sylvie raised a brow at him before moving up to match Ellie's pace. She patted the girl's shoulder. It's okay. Your brother's talent is considered an anomaly even amongst Asuras. Don't compare yourself to a freak like him. Freak is a bit much, isn't it? Art muttered, scratching the back of his neck. Ellie glanced over her shoulder with a smirk. No, I think freak describes you perfectly in this regard. They reached the meeting room after parting ways with Art's sister. He had wanted a bit more time to speak with Sylvie, about the changes in her body now that the seal had been broken, but also about the responsibilities she would need to face moving forward. As they approached the entrance, The two guards flanking the doorway clicked their heels together and saluted sharply before stepping aside to let them in. Seated directly within view of the doorway was Virion, who turned toward them the moment they entered. His expression brightened as he rose from his seat. "Arthur, you finally arrived." "Commander," Art greeted with a polite nod, while Sylvie dipped her head slightly in acknowledgement. "Sit," Virion motioned warmly, his eyes drifting across the room with a grin tugging at his weathered features. Art followed his gaze, only to spot someone he hadn't expected. Seated at the table alongside the rest of the council was a familiar figure, the dwarf Bundamog Lonuid, twiddling his beard with a bored expression. "Ho, if it isn't the young Lance," Bund drawled flatly. "I see the meetings have taken a toll on you," Art replied, grinning to match Virion's. "Never has my ass been so sore since the days I got whipped by my mother as a child," Bund groaned, stretching his stout limbs with a wince. Art let out a soft laugh before shifting his attention to the rest of the council. "Councilman," he greeted with a respectful nod. "Councilwomen." "General Arthur," Priscilla Glader acknowledged, her tone composed. "You've come at a good time." "Yes," Blaine Glader added. "We were awaiting your return to continue the discussion surrounding your report." "Arthur," Alduin Erlith greeted warmly. "Take a seat, you two." "Welcome back," Mariel Erlith said with a gentle smile, her voice carrying a note of sincere relief. "Thank you," Art replied. He moved past the king and queen of Elenoir, settling into a seat beside Bund. Sylvie quietly climbed into the chair next to him, her legs too short to reach the floor as they swung slightly above it. Virion returned to his seat and carefully rolled up the transmission scroll. There was a brief pause as the members of the council exchanged glances, an unspoken tension hanging in the air like smoke. Finally, it was the head of the Glader family who broke the silence, clearing his throat. "Well, we've all been briefed on General Arthur's and General Aya's report, so I say we get right to it," Blaine began. "I believe we should keep our forces as they are and send reinforcements to the Elshire Forest on an as-needed basis." Despite the human king's sunken cheeks, dark-circled eyes, and the stubble shadowing his jaw, a clear reflection of his weariness, his voice remained firm and steady. Virion stayed silent, maintaining a neutral expression. It was his role, after all, to listen, to judge only after all voices had been heard. "Councilman Blaine," Mariel said coolly, her words cutting through the chamber's warmth like ice. "Your suggestion to send reinforcements on an as-needed basis to the border between the Beast Glades and the Elshire Forest suggests you don't see the Elven territory as worthy of defending." Virion's eyes flicked toward her. Years of serving on the council had worn away his once-spirited daughter-in-law's softness, replacing it with the polished edge of a seasoned diplomat. "Oh, don't twist my words, Councilwoman Mariel," Blaine replied sharply. "The report detailed 2 coordinated strikes. This is the enemy's only attempt to breach Elven territory. Compare that to the near-daily battles at the Wall. Shouldn't it be obvious that protecting Sapin's borders takes precedence?" "No one is suggesting that the defense of the Elshire Forest should take precedence over Sapin," Alduin interjected, his tone calm and measured. "However, just as Elven soldiers stand guard at the Wall to help defend Sapin, there ought to be some consistent presence on the forest's borders as well, don't you think?" "The Elshire Forest is a form of defense," Priscilla Glader interjected, gesturing toward the map unfurled across the table. "The mana-laden fog has served as a natural deterrent to everyone but elves for as long as it's existed. Even the attacks yesterday would have failed eventually had we simply chosen to ignore the intruders. The Alacrians and their beasts would have wandered aimlessly, lost in the fog, and starved long before reaching any of Elenoir's cities, even those nearest the border." Alduin's expression hardened. "The forest is not just a deterrent. It is part of the kingdom of Elenoir," he said, his voice rising. "There are still tribes who live outside the cities within those woods. By that same logic, Sapin should abandon the Wall and allow the border outposts to fall. Less land to defend, isn't that right?" "That's hardly an adequate comparison," Blaine shot back, slamming both palms on the polished surface of the round table. His chair scraped slightly behind him. The most direct route to Elenoir's major cities runs through the northern Grand Mountains, from Sapin. If Sapin were to fall, even just the outermost cities, the Alacrians would have a clear path straight into the heart of your lands as well. "Watch your tone, councilman," Mariel snapped, her bright blue eyes darkening with fury. "You speak as if the elves are in your debt, yet we've sent plenty of mages to support your forces at the wall. If even a quarter of those soldiers had been assigned to patrol the forest borders, this meeting wouldn't be necessary." "The truth remains, Mariel," Priscilla said smoothly, her voice carefully measured, as though tone alone could temper the rising tension. "While you may claim the Elshire Forest as part of your kingdom, no elven city, not even a town, has come under siege. Until that happens, diverting troops would only weaken the wall, where Dickathan faces a constant battle." Alduin let out a slow breath and rubbed the bridge of his nose, closing his eyes as if willing away the headache building behind them. When he opened them, his emerald gaze shifted toward Virion, sharp with quiet resolve. "All we're requesting is to recall some of our men back to Elenoir so they can protect their home," he said. Blaine was quick to respond. "These soldiers are no longer your men. Have you forgotten? The council was created to unite our races in anticipation of an external threat. Our responsibility is not to individual kingdoms, but to all of Dickathan. We are here to lead the continent to victory over the Alacrians, not to prioritize Elenoir above the rest." He turned then, eyes locking with Virion's. "I implore Commander Virion to remain impartial, for the sake of Dickathan and all its people." "You speak of impartiality," Alduin snapped, his voice rising. "Yet you've been relentlessly focused on what benefits your kingdom. This council was formed to bring Sapin, Elenoir, and Darv together to protect one another. Instead, our mages bleed defending Sapin while the enemy tramples through our own lands. And where are the dwarves in all this?" His tone sharpened, his ears tinged red with anger. "1/3 of this council is missing, executed for treason, for putting their selfish desires above the good of the people, as I'm sure you well remember." "Enough!" A heavy silence fell over the chamber as Virion released a wave of pressure, his intent pressing down on everyone present. Even Priscilla, whose core teetered on the edge of silver, visibly paled, her posture stiffening as she struggled to remain composed beneath the weight of his aura. "I've heard both sides," Virion said, his voice calm but laced with authority. "And before you further degrade yourselves by bickering like spoiled children, I would like to speak." Blaine and Alduin both flushed, a mix of anger and embarrassment rising in their faces, but neither dared to interrupt. Virion's gaze swept over each of them, his expression unyielding. Then he continued, his tone clipped and precise. "Based on the consistency and scale of the attacks, Sapin remains the primary target of the Alacrians. As Councilman Blaine rightly pointed out, the most accessible path to the major cities of both Sapin and Elenoir runs through the northern range of the Grand Mountains, through the Wall. We will proceed under the assumption that the enemy understands this, and we will maintain our focus on defending that front." "That still doesn't..." Alduin's words died in his throat as Virion released another pulse of mana. The Elven King's jaw clenched shut, his lips pressed into a thin line as the pressure weighed down on him like a mountain. "As for the defense of the southern borders of Elenoir, we'll relocate several units of the Trailblazer Division to the dungeons nearest the border. If there is another incursion through the forest, they can resurface and act as additional support." The room remained tense, but everyone seemed satisfied, just barely. "Good," Virion said with a nod. "Since the rest of the lances are currently out on missions, we'll proceed with the meeting. But before anything else, I'd like General Arthur to provide a full debrief on what transpired at the border of the Elshire Forest." Art took a sip from the glass of water before him, gathering his thoughts. Then he launched into a detailed recounting of the events, including his interrogation of the Alacrian mage and the information he had gleaned. It took nearly an hour to bring the council and his bond fully up to speed. "It seems we've been underestimating the abilities of the Alacrian mages," Virion remarked thoughtfully. Underestimating? Blaine furrowed his brow in confusion. If anything, learning that those Alacrian bastards are so limited and specialized makes me think we've been overestimating them. I have to agree with Councilman Blaine on this one, Alduin added. I think this is a clear weakness in their fighting tactics. I don't think it's as simple as that, Bund argued, rubbing his beard in thought. On the surface, their specialization might be seen as a weakness, Virion agreed. But from what General Arthur found out, their method of awakening and training in magic seems a lot more advanced than ours. How so? Marial asked curiously. Bund spoke up again, a tinge of excitement in his voice. This is me just speculating at this point, but with the system of marks and crests and whatnot, the mages of Alakria seem to be hyper-focused on a spell and its alterations and evolutions. That means, while mages of Dicathan focus on various spells of their attributed element or elements, he looked at Art. These Alacrian mages spend their lives honing a single spell and building off only that. What Elder Bund says adds up, considering what I've seen on the field, Art added. One of the strikers I battled against only used one spell, but from the cast time to the durability and potency of the magic, I had thought he was around the level of a yellow core. And these specialized mages work in small teams to negate their weaknesses. I'd say that only our veteran mages of light yellow core or higher could actually exploit these limitations. Duels are one thing. On the front line, versatile mages aren't as useful as specialized soldiers who are damn well good at one thing, Bund concluded grimly. We need to send this information to our captains, as well as the guilds and military academies, so they can develop better ways to fight against these specialized mages, Blaine grumbled in frustration. I already stopped by the wall and told the captains there, Art said, looking at Virion. Good. Now let's discuss plans on how to best deploy our forces, Virion said heavily. I had originally hoped to discuss this with Lord Alder, but since the Asuras have ceased contact with us, well, the mention of Aldir and the Asuras sent a sharp ache through Art's chest. He wanted to share what Agrona had told him right then and there, but he held his tongue. This discussion won't get far if I say it now, he thought. You'll need to tell everyone eventually, Sylvie sent quietly, but maybe once this discussion is over. True to his expectations, the meeting soon devolved into a heated debate as council members argued over where soldiers and mages were needed most. The main problem was the sheer scale of the territory, and the Alacrians had kept their objectives frustratingly obscure. From the battles so far, it was clear the Alacrians were heavily focused on breaching the wall, which would unleash corrupted beasts across Sapan's easternmost cities. They had also exploited the dwarven tunnels throughout the Kingdom of Darv to move their forces from the southern coast up to the Darv-Sapan border. According to Bund, a faction of radical dwarves, deeply discontent with their status in Dicathan, actually hoped for an Alacrian takeover, expecting to rise above humans and elves in the new order. Bund was clear that he and his loyalists were committed to rooting out this faction as soon as possible. What was more troubling, Alacrian ships continued to be spotted all along the western shores, forcing coastal cities like Telmore, Ediston, and Mabur to bolster defenses not only on their eastern borders, in case the wall failed, but also along their western coasts. The council had reasonably concluded that the main Alacrian assault would target Sapan, but Art's last two missions suggested otherwise. Towns as far north as Ashbur, from which the enemy could easily reach the Grand Mountains or several of Elenoir's most populous cities, had Alacrian forces hidden within them. The initial assumption had been that these troops intended to march south to join allies coming in from the western shores. But with recent incursions into elven lands from the Beast Glades, it was possible the northern Alacrian forces were instead moving east toward Elenoir. Alduin and Marial's primary concern remained the defense of the Elven Kingdom, while Blaine and Priscilla continued to argue against diverting troops into Elenoir, worried such a move would stretch the already strained Sapan forces even thinner. Bund and his forces, aided by General Micah, were primarily focused on rooting out any remaining Alacrian holdouts within Darv and dealing with their internal conflict against the radical faction. As a result, They were able to offer little additional support to either kingdom. Throughout the debate, Virion maintained a neutral stance, allowing the kings and queens to navigate the complex issue. He remained silent for most of the meeting, which stretched well into the night, only contributing strategic guidance when the discussion turned to specific combat scenarios. "This is why I wanted to wait until Lord Alder was here," Blaine huffed. "He would know that it's foolish to spread our forces even thinner than they already are." "Commander Virion, you mentioned that Elder Camus had gone back to Elenoir after my training with him was over," Art said, ignoring the King of Sapin. "Yes, his latest transmission scroll placed him in the northern city of Assassinated. Does he know about the attacks coming from the Beast Glades?" "He was made aware, of course," Virion said, understanding where Art was going. "Perhaps we could recruit him to assist in surveying the southern border for any suspicious movement." "The Elshire Forest spans hundreds of miles. No matter how powerful Elder Camus is, he's just one man," Mariel rebutted. "And General Aya," Virion added, turning to Blaine and Priscilla. "If your 2 lances remain in Sapin, is it acceptable that I keep a lance in Elenoir? She can be pulled back if absolutely necessary, and we still have General Arthur." Blaine looked like he was about to say something, but Priscilla intervened. "That's acceptable." "It'll have to do, as a temporary solution," Alduin stressed, catching Virion's eye. "If these attacks on Elenoir escalate, we'll need to send troops capable of navigating through the forest to defend it." "Don't sugarcoat it, Alduin. Just say you'll take the elves back, because defending Elenoir is more important to you than defending all of Dicathan," Blaine snapped. "Enough!" Virion barked, glaring around the table. "If that's all, we'll end the meeting here." "Actually," Art interrupted, "there is one more topic on the agenda that we should address as soon as possible." "Oh? And what is that?" Virion asked. There was an air of nervous curiosity at the table as the others waited for Art to continue. Art looked at Sylvie, and she met his gaze with a resolute expression. Letting out a deep breath, he began. "It's about the absence of Aldir and the Asuras." The meeting room had fallen into a heavy silence by the time Art finished recounting what Agrona had told him, omitting only the most sensitive details. He spoke openly of Agrona's resentment toward the Indrath clan and how the Vritra had increased the number of mages among the Alacrians through experimentation. But Art kept certain truths to himself, truths he wasn't ready to share, not yet. He didn't mention that Agrona knew he was reincarnated, or that the Vritra leader was aware of who he had been in his past life. Instead, he framed the conversation with Agrona as a kind of one-sided ultimatum, a declaration of dominance meant to pressure Dicathan into surrender. This approach allowed him to reveal what came next, that the Asuras, having used Dicathan's war as a distraction, had launched their own assault against the Vritra in Alakria, and failed. Virion swore, the word sharp as a blade in the quiet chamber. His hands slammed against the table with uncharacteristic force, and the scowl on his face distorted his otherwise composed features. The tips of his ears flushed red with fury. "Those conceited sons of—" he growled, "as if it wasn't bad enough that they used us in this war for their own purposes. They didn't even succeed." Virion pushed back his chair and rose abruptly, pacing the length of the chamber with tense, measured steps. Curses spilled from his lips in a low growl, barely audible but unmistakable in their fury. The rest of the council remained quiet, whether stunned by Art's revelation or unnerved by Virion's uncharacteristic outburst. Their gazes flicked between one another, but none dared speak. At last, Virion stopped and turned to face Art, his eyes sharp with restrained intensity. "Arthur, what else did Agrona say in his message?" "Just that Ephiodus's attack on Alakria failed," Art replied calmly. "Agrona used the failed assault to further discourage the Asuras from getting involved in our war, by demanding the clans in Ephiodus cut off all communications with us." Virion's jaw clenched, the sound of his grinding teeth the only response he gave as the weight of that truth settled over the chamber. "At least that explains why we haven't seen more scythes and retainers yet," Boone chimed in. The dwarven elder seemed the least shaken by Art's news, He had never actually met the Asuras in the first place. Agrona must have kept his strongest soldiers, the scythes, retainers, and whatever the hell these basilisks are, in Alakria in case something like this happened. That makes sense, Mariel replied, her brows furrowed in thought. But that leads us to the next question. Are we to expect the rest of Agrona's scythes and their retainers to come to Dicathan now that the Asuras of Epheodus have attacked them and failed? The atmosphere in the room thickened, pressing down on everyone like a weighted blanket. I'm sure this battle between Epheodus and Alakria wasn't as one-sided as Agrona led Arthur and all of us to believe, Alduin said, his voice calm but firm, trying to inject reason into the silence. That's right, Blaine added quickly, his tone more urgent. I've experienced Lord Alder's power firsthand. There's no way Alakria repelled a full-blown assault by the Asuras of Epheodus without suffering losses of their own. Hell, their home might be in shambles right now. He spoke with conviction, but Art could tell Blaine was trying to convince himself as much as the others. That's all sunshine and peaches. But from my experience, nothing good comes from expecting the best in situations like this, Boone said grimly, arms crossed and brow furrowed. He's right, Art agreed. We should assume that both retainers and scythes are headed this way. Mariel suddenly straightened in her seat, her eyes wide. The gates the Alacrians hid down in the dungeons of the Beast Glades, she said, voice rising. What if the retainers and scythes are already here? According to Captain Trotius's reports, there hasn't been a teleportation gate sighting in months, not since the last one was destroyed, Priscilla answered. From what I gathered, the constructs were of poor design and failed after only a few Alacrian troops made it through. One soldier witnessed only half of an Alacrian mage coming through a portal before it broke, and that mage died within seconds. Right now, the Trailblazer Division is mainly wiping out corrupted beasts and their controllers before they're able to make it up to the surface. That adds up, from what I've seen, Art muttered, recalling how even the scythe, Saris Vritra, had arrived through a teleportation gate hidden within the kingdom of Darv before continuing by land through Sepen. We'll just have to hope that's true, Virian said, still pacing. Then are we to expect them to arrive from the western coast by ship? Blaine asked, his face pale. If that's the case, no amount of wall building is going to make a difference. As the council continued their discussion, weighing grim possibilities, Art's mind drifted back to his previous life. Wars were rare in that world. Most conflicts were resolved through Paragon duels, but Lady Vera had been thorough in her teachings nonetheless. They had gone through countless rounds of strategic board games, dissecting theory, analyzing feints and troop movements, and studying historical wars. He was sure those lessons held useful insight now, but a sudden sharp clap jolted him back to the present. While we have a lot to think about, I suggest we take time to rest. Rested minds think more clearly than those that are tired and overtaxed, Virian said in a defeated tone. We'll meet back here at sunrise. Art glanced out the window and saw that night had fallen. He quickly calculated how much time remained for rest. Not enough, he thought, stepping out of the room behind Bund. The dwarven elder groaned as he stretched his back, muttering, I wonder if it's not too late to just throw myself out into the field and fight the enemy face to face instead of from behind a meeting room table. Sylvie and Art walked to their room in silence, the tension between them needing no words. Stripping down to his inner shirt and trousers, Art sank into the couch. His vision dulled, his thoughts dissolving into silence, until a subtle movement from Sylvie caught his attention. Her plain black dress twisted and shifted, the fabric swirling as if alive. Sleeves grew from the shoulders, and the hem stretched until it brushed her ankles, transforming into a nightgown. How'd you do that? He asked. I can mold my scales into clothes in this form, she replied softly, morphing the bottom half of the gown into pants to demonstrate. What else can you do? He asked, leaning forward, his curiosity stirred. Sylvie settled onto the couch across from Art, folding her legs beneath her. So far, I've been focusing mostly on how to function in this bipedal form. Apart from the lack of stability these silly legs provide, though, she added with a small smirk. I have to admit that I've begun to understand why the Asuras choose to stay in this form. Oh? Do tell, Art said, reclining deeper into the cushions. For a brief moment, it felt like old times, just the two of them, free of war and burden. Mana manipulation and even using ether is easier in this form, Sylvie admitted, curling and uncurling her fingers slowly, as if feeling the flow of power beneath her skin. Interesting, he said thoughtfully. So, what are your magic capabilities like now that the seal is broken? Because the Indrath clan are ether users, most of my mana manipulation abilities focus on strengthening my body, she replied. But I am able to dispel a large amount of my mana at once. Suddenly, mana began to swirl and gather in Sylvie's open palm, casting a brilliant light that filled the room. The light artifacts hanging from the walls and ceiling flickered and dimmed, overpowered by the raw energy she was emitting. Art's eyes widened as the orb of concentrated mana steadily grew in size. Sylvie, please don't destroy this room, or this castle. Her usually stoic expression cracked into a grin as she turned toward him. Is the mighty lance scared of a little girl now? Those jagged horns kinda negate the little girl thing, he said, inching farther back into his seat as the glowing sphere pulsed with dense power. But seriously, you still stumble over your own feet, Sylv. Let's not endanger everyone in the castle. The glowing orb in Sylvie's hand gradually dimmed, dissolving into faint particles that shimmered before vanishing. She let out a deep breath. I'm glad I was able to break the seal. I'll be more useful out in the field, but there's a part of me that feels foreign now. You're still getting used to your human form, Art offered gently, hoping to comfort her. Sylvie shook her head. It's not like that. It's more internal. Like there's more to my abilities than I ever realized. Well, you'll have plenty of chances to figure it out. You heard what they said in the meeting. Things are only going to get more hectic. Then at least we'll have one another to count on, she said, her tone firm with conviction. Once I gain better control of this form, I think the two of us defeating a scythe isn't impossible. Isn't impossible, Art repeated with a laugh. Not the best of odds, but much better than before. Maybe we'll have some time to spar before going on a mission, Sylvie said hopefully. I'd like to test out the extent of my control over ether in this form. We'll be lucky if we can actually get a good night's sleep without being disturbed, Art replied with a yawn. He pushed himself off the couch and stumbled across the room, collapsing face first into bed. He would have liked to stay up and talk more. Sylvie having a human form felt almost like gaining another younger sister, albeit one with imposing horns, but the weight of exhaustion was already pulling him under. Speaking of sisters, Sylvie chimed, her voice entering his thoughts. Wasn't Ellie waiting for us? She's probably asleep by now, he mumbled, his words slurring as sleep overtook him. I'm not so sure about that, Arthur. Ellie's been looking forward to having you back, however briefly that might be. Art murmured, I'll try to spend time with her, tomorrow, his voice trailing off as sleep tugged at him. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open at a firm knock on the door that jolted him awake. What? He snapped, annoyance thick in his tone. A deep voice responded from behind the door. I apologize for the disturbance, General Arthur, but I have a message from Commander Virian to meet him in the dungeon. Art shut his eyes tightly, unwilling to leave the soft, feather-stuffed pillow cradling his head. This is just a dream. No need to get up. General Arthur? The voice pressed again. With a growl, Art rolled out of bed and slipped into a robe. Come on, Sylv. Let's go. Must I? Sylvie's reply came silently, conveyed without speech. I just made myself comfortable, and the guard only asked for you. Traitor, Art muttered, heading for the door. He followed the guard down the dimly lit hallway, descending several flights of stairs until they reached the castle's lower levels. Did Commander Virian provide any details about why he wanted to see me? Art asked. My apologies, but no, sir, I'm afraid not. They continued in silence until they reached the reinforced doors leading down into the dungeon. The members of the council, still clad in their sleepwear, stood before the door, looking as if they had been pulled from their beds without notice or explanation. Another figure stood right in front of the door, a hulking man, a head taller than Blaine and twice as wide. It took Art a moment to recognize him as the assistant to the old man in charge of interrogating the prisoners. "Arthur, do you know what this is about?" Bund asked as the guard and Art approached, his annoyance barely concealed. Art jerked a thumb toward the guard. "I came here because this guy said Virion called for me." "We just arrived as well. What is going on?" Alduin asked nervously. "I called for you all because this man..." Virion turned back to face Gentry's assistant. "What was your name again?" "Duvet," the burly man grunted. "Because Duvet said that Gentry finally got one of the prisoners to talk," Virion finished. "Who? The retainer?" Priscilla asked, arms crossed. "I'm not sure," Virion replied, glaring at the burly man. "And where's Gentry now?" Art asked, looking behind the interrogator's assistant, as if the old man might be hiding in his shadow. "Shouldn't we go inside instead of waiting out here?" "Master Gentry will be here soon," Duvet replied, standing his ground. Hardly a minute passed, but Art's patience was growing dangerously thin when the dungeon door slid open and the hooked-nosed elder trudged out. "Gentry!" Blaine barked. "What exactly is going on?" "My apologies to the council and General Arthur. I was just finishing up the maintenance on the retainer's restraining system when he called for me. Still, I didn't want to take even the smallest of chances of my beloved prisoner breaking free while we were all down there," Gentry said, cleaning his wrinkled hands on a cloth. Virion's eyes widened, and he eagerly pressed the interrogator for details. "What did the retainer say? Did you finally break him? Tell us." "Unfortunately, no," Gentry rasped. "Then why did you feel the need to drag us down here at this godforsaken hour?" Mariel demanded, her eyes narrowed. Gentry let out an uncomfortable cough before speaking again. "I have yet to break the retainer, but the traitor, Radius, I think that was his name, has finally spoken." "What did he say?" Art asked, stepping forward through the council members. "Did he give you any information?" "Well, no, not exactly." "On with it, you tittering old corpse," Bund snapped. "Stop speaking in circles and spit it out." "Tittering old Gentry," Virion growled in warning. Gentry winced but took a step forward, puffing his chest out. "Thanks to yours truly, the traitor has finally spoken, and he has requested to speak." His crooked finger pointed toward Art, but only to General Arthur. The hallway fell into a heavy silence as every gaze followed the long, crooked finger pointing at Art. He frowned. "Me?" His thoughts scrambled, trying to make sense of it. Why would Radius want to speak to him, and what could he possibly say under these circumstances? "That traitor has cleft the Dwarven Kingdom in two and shit on our reputation, then left me to clean up his unwiped ass. Who is he to make demands?" Bond growled. "Do you think he's aiming to make some sort of deal with General Arthur?" Blaine asked. "If he wanted to strike a deal, he'd have a much better chance of doing so with Commander Virion or anyone else in the council," Mariel replied. "Perhaps it's because of your ties to Elijah," Virion suggested. "That's what I'm afraid of," Art muttered with a sigh. Gentry gave a theatrical cough, loud and deliberate, drawing everyone's attention. "Council members and Lance. It would be an understatement to say it has been difficult for me to get the traitor to talk. Perhaps it's best we capitalize on this achievement and speak with him while he's still able." All eyes turned to Commander Virion. He gave a terse nod. "Lead the way, Gentry," Art said, stepping forward and walking through the reinforced doors. The familiar musty scent of the dungeon curled into his nose, bringing with it a wave of unpleasant memories from his own time spent down here. He followed Gentry without a word, the heavy door creaking shut behind him as the council remained behind, watching with no small amount of reluctance. After passing through another secured entry, this one leading deeper into the lower levels reserved only for the most dangerous prisoners, Gentry brought him to a cramped, barren cell no larger than a shoe closet. Taking a deep breath, Art waited as Gentry carefully unlocked the cell. I will be here, just outside the door, General Arthur. I'm sure you already know, but please refrain from touching anything, Gentry warned before pulling open the cell door and stepping aside. Art remained silent until the old man exited, then shifted his gaze to the cuffed dwarf kneeling on the floor. Radius. The dwarf twitched slightly at the sound of his name, but then a slow, deliberate smile carved itself across his pale face. My gratitude for your time and presence, he said, dipping his head. Whether it was a gesture of respect or mockery, Art couldn't tell. Allow me to begin, Radius added. Begin? Art asked, frowning. Art didn't relax. His instincts prickled. This wasn't the attitude he'd expected. A lad of humble origins, born wrapped in rags in a sad little town, he began, finally lifting his head. Within, however, he was more, born from and for a life of renown. And as with all heroes to be, the lad had the looks and the lad had the might. Radius stretched out one arm while his other hand lay over his heart. His mother taught him the world. His father taught him to fight. Art watched, dumbstruck, as the mad dwarf continued his epic. Radius's voice got deeper, darker. That is, until the day came when the lad saw there was a larger stage to play. His blood knew well they could no longer contain the lad's fire, which raged inside him hot as a king's funeral pyre. So they took up their bags and wished their small town good luck. Radius let out a breath. But woe, as all stories go, tragedy struck. Radius, Art said, growing annoyed with his recitation, but was silenced by a raised finger. But never fret, never doubt, because as all stories go, a hero never drops out. So he grows and he grows, through heartache and death throes, never ceasing, overcoming. Radius looked up at the dim flickering light above them. Alas, every light needs a shadow, every hero a foe. The brighter the light, the darker its night. Finally, Radius met Art's gaze, grinning like a fool. But I ask you this, hero to be. What happens when your foe, who has crossed both time and space, is actually brighter than thee? Perhaps a fair maiden's shining night is another one's deadly blight, and the side of dark and of light is determined only by who wins the last fight. An uncomfortable silence lingered as Radius finished his strange poem. Just when Art thought things couldn't get any stranger, the dwarf, arms still chained to the floor, reached out and grabbed his hand with blood-crusted fingers. Art froze. Radius's glossy, soulless eyes squinted into thin, watery crescents as he smiled up at him and nodded. Ah, good. You're real. I was afraid you were another illusion and that my performance had gone to waste. Art stared down at him, unsure how to react. The dwarf groaned, almost in pleasure. I'd forgotten how warm a person could be, he murmured, eyes unfocused as he began to stroke Art's hand absently, like he was petting a cat. Art jerked his hand from Radius's grasp. It seems that your time spent here has made you unbalanced, Radius snickered. Of all the interesting and exciting words in our language, you choose unbalanced? Not crazy or insane or mad, maybe even cracked or nutty, but you choose unbalanced. I don't have time to waste on lectures about my word choice, especially from someone so unbalanced, Art stressed, narrowing his eyes. Radius shrugged. Regardless, it is of your own free will whether you choose to ignore my words or not, poetry or prose alike. So, that poem you just recited, I thought a heart-to-heart conversation would be a bit boring, and though I'm not very well versed in the art of poetry, I had to do something to pass the time down here, Radius replied seriously. But the moment of clarity lasted only a second. He leered at Art, his eyes twinkling. Or, this might just be the rambling of a man unbalanced. A sigh escaped Art as he shook his head. Be honest, though. My rhyming may have been a bit elementary, but it was catchy, was it not? Radius grinned, wrinkles deepening across his ghastly face. Art's frustration finally boiled over. I don't think you understand the gravity of your situation, Radius, You're going to be here for a long time, and it's going to be unpleasant. How much you cooperate, such as revealing anything that might be of help to the council, to Dicathan, will ultimately decide how unpleasant. Now is not the time to worry whether your rhymes are catchy or not. I know precisely what sort of position I'm in, and I've told you exactly what I wanted to, Radius said, no longer looking at him. The dwarf awkwardly attempted to lie back and rest his head in his hands, struggling against the chains. After several tedious moments, he managed to settle into an uncomfortable contortion. Again, what you gain from it is none of my concern. Art gnashed his teeth in frustration and waited in silence, hoping, foolishly, that Radius might change his mind. In the end, the traitor simply waved him off with a flick of his shackled hand, already humming the rhythm of his own poem like a lullaby. Scoffing, Art called for Gentry and ordered him to lock the cell. As he turned to leave, still fuming over Radius's twisted attitude, his eyes fell on the cell beside it, this one even smaller, its frame hunched and tight. Despite the mana-inhibiting material that composed the cell's walls, an oppressive aura leaked from within like rot seeping from a festering wound. For a brief moment, Art hesitated. He felt the temptation stir. He had grown stronger, broken through to a stage few mages in Dicathan could even dream of reaching. And yet, the fear he had felt during his battle with Uto, even with Sylvie's help, had dug itself into the foundation of his spirit. It festered there still, confronting the retainer again. Maybe it would help him erase that lingering stain. But the thought was fleeting. "There's nothing to gain, Arthur," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "He's bound, broken, a hollow echo of the creature that nearly killed you." Without looking back, he left the dungeon behind, relieved to escape the reek of blood, mold, and Radius's insidious humming, though the rhythm of that damn poem still lingered in the corners of his mind. The members of the council were still gathered at the dungeon's entrance, their faces tight with concern and fatigue. 6 sets of eyes fixed on Art as he emerged from the dim corridor, each silently demanding answers. Art motioned over his shoulder to the gaunt, hook-nosed interrogator trailing behind him. Gentry's interrogation tactics seemed to have left Radius a little unhinged. He dragged me down here in the middle of the night just to recite a poem. "Poem?" Blaine echoed, his brows shooting up. Radius had always been viewed as a level-headed intellectual, mild-mannered, diplomatic, with a penchant for careful strategy. The idea of him losing his grip on sanity sent a ripple of surprise through the council members. "What was the poem about?" Virion asked carefully, his voice low. Art folded his arms, his gaze distant. "Honestly, I'm not sure." His behavior was erratic. The poem itself was vague, layered with metaphors that didn't seem to lead anywhere. But he hesitated, recalling Radius's unsettling smile. "Something about it didn't sit right with me. I'd like the council's permission to look into it further before drawing any conclusions." Gentry stepped forward with a rasping cough. "While our methods of extracting truth have yielded results in the past, they do sometimes take a toll on a subject's sanity. My sincerest apologies for the false alarm. I truly believed he was ready to confess something important." Alduin rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Seeing as we've learned nothing of substance tonight, perhaps we should reconvene at our next scheduled meeting?" "I second that," Bund muttered, already turning toward the stairs. "We can decide whether to waste time on deciphering nonsense after we've gotten some sleep." If Radius's mind has fractured, then his words are likely just that. "Fractures," Priscilla added coldly, her robe swishing as she followed behind. One by one, the council members filtered out, leaving Art standing in the corridor, the faint echo of Radius's sing-song voice still whispering in the back of his mind. After the impromptu gathering dispersed, Art made his way back to his quarters. His body ached for rest, but his mind refused to settle. Sleep drifted farther from reach with every repetition of Radius's strange poem echoing in his thoughts. As much as he wanted to write off the traitor's ramblings, A part of him couldn't help but wonder if there had been some truth buried in the madness. He dimmed the light artifact on his desk to a soft glow, just enough to see without fully disrupting the darkness. With slow, deliberate strokes, he began jotting down what he could recall of the poem, verse by verse, rhyme by rhyme, allowing the structure to pull him through the fragments his memory had preserved. Once the poem had taken shape on the page, he leaned back and read it over. Whether it was the haze of exhaustion or the surreal nature of Radius's delivery, Art wasn't entirely confident in the accuracy of what he'd written. Still, the message that emerged was unmistakable. It spoke of a hero, but it was more than just a tale of valor. There was something cryptic woven into the lines, something pointed. If he took Radius at his word, if he dared assume the dwarf hadn't entirely lost his mind, then the poem had been intentional. A message meant specifically for him. The way Radius had looked at him, spoken to him, had been too focused to be random. And so, with a sigh, Art allowed himself to entertain the idea that the hero in Radius's poem, the lad wrapped in metaphor and verse, was meant to be him. Art couldn't shake the question, how did Radius know details of his childhood? It wasn't just the fact that he'd grown up modestly in Ashbur, but the poem itself had mentioned the lad wishing the town luck before a tragedy struck. It was probably not too difficult for Radius to conduct a background check using his resources while still part of the council, yet despite that, the whole situation felt unsettling. One particular verse lingered in Art's mind, unnerving him, though he wasn't entirely sure if he was recalling it correctly. Had Radius said, "From a life of renown," or "for a life of renown"? He could swear he'd heard both, but how would either make sense, unless... Art shook his head, breaking the train of thought. Frustrated both with Radius for the unnecessarily cryptic message and with himself for having initially dismissed the poem as the ramblings of a madman, Art forced himself to move on. The latter half of the poem grew more ambiguous, drifting toward the familiar territory of tired prophecies, the sort of vague, overused predictions that peppered nearly every hero's tale he'd encountered in both his lives. Art pondered the lines of the poem, such as, "The brighter the light, the darker its night," and suspected they alluded to his foe growing stronger as he did, almost as if he was destined to face enemies matched to his own power. Then there was the verse about one person's night being another's blight. He assumed the mad dwarf was referring to him, but to whom had he been a blight? Perhaps the Vritra and the Elacrians, but that was no secret and hardly something to be so cryptic about. He mulled over the poem for another half hour before finally giving up. He resolved to visit the dwarf again in the morning and ask for a repeat performance. Hopefully, Radius would be up for an encore. Though skeptical about the poem's meaning, Art felt a powerful curiosity gnawing at him. Sliding into bed, he tried to clear his mind of the mad poem and its lingering questions. Yet as he drifted off to sleep, half-formed lines and nonsensical rhymes continued to swirl through his thoughts, fighting to settle into their proper places. Circe Milview didn't turn to look. "How much longer?" Fane demanded, his voice a hissing whisper. From the corner of her eye, she could see his head constantly swiveling left and right. She knew his eyes were darting from tree to tree, searching for any sign of an approaching enemy. It had been the same each time, and the long days within the cursed elven forest had only made him more agitated. She held up 2 fingers, turning her focus back to the tree in front of her. The crest on her back flared, and she pushed Fane's anxious needling to the back of her mind as she fought to keep her powers under control. Mana coursed through her arms and into the tree itself, slowly forming into a beacon that would light the Elacrian army's way through the mists. "My veiling barrier isn't going to last much longer, Circe, not when I'm covering such a wide range," Cole said through gritted teeth, louder than he should have. Concerned, she glanced back at the shield. His long brown hair was stuck to his face with sweat. She felt more than saw it when the three-point array stabilized within the tree. She waited a moment to make sure it was entirely concealed, then let out a sigh of relief. Done. Without a word, Maeve grabbed Cersei's arm and pulled her to her feet. Cersei felt Cole's barrier disperse as he and Fane fell in behind them, putting distance between the group and the freshly imprinted array. Lingering near such a potent source of magic was unwise, no matter how many precautions they'd taken to avoid detection by Decathian forces. They had already come across the remains of another group that hadn't been cautious enough. Despite the urgency of their task, their pace remained frustratingly slow. With her crest, Cersei could extend her senses out to about 30 yards. Without it, they would have been blind. She was the only one able to see more than a few feet through the dense fog that slithered between the trees, untouched by any spell they'd tried. It made progress sluggish and taxing. "Do you see anyone, Cersei?" Fane asked for the 5th time, his sharp features twisted in an angry glare. "I said I'll tell you if I see anything out of the ordinary," she snapped, turning to shoot him a warning look. Fane narrowed his eyes, clearly displeased, but kept his mouth shut. After nearly an hour of creeping through the fog-laden forest, Cersei raised a hand to halt the group. "We need to place another array." Everyone moved without needing instruction. Maeve climbed into a nearby tree, eyes scanning for threats. Cole stepped in beside Cersei, casting a veil to conceal the mana buildup as she worked. Fane took the perimeter, ever watchful for signs of an enemy approach. Once everyone was in position, Cersei began setting up the first part of the three-point array. As a mid-tier sentry, the process itself wasn't difficult. The challenge lay in ensuring the array remained undetectable until activation. Even the slightest leak of mana could give them away. The elves hidden throughout the forest were sensitive to the smallest magical disturbances. If even one array was discovered, the entire operation would fall apart. As if summoned by her own apprehension, a rustle came from a bush to her left. She flinched, and the mana threading from her fingertips into the tree faltered. Fane appeared instantly. He turned toward her, holding a limp rodent in one hand. Without a word, he tossed the crushed body back into the undergrowth, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. As expected of a veteran emblem holder, Cersei thought. His attitude was unbearable, but there was no denying his effectiveness. And since his job was to keep her alive long enough to carve a path through the forest, she supposed she could overlook a few of his less charming qualities. Still, if an elven arrow were to find his throat, she wouldn't mourn him. Cersei turned her focus back to the old tree and pushed out her mana, channeling it deep into the trunk until it anchored within the core. Once it was in place, she set about concealing every trace of the spellwork. The wound in the bark, the lingering fluctuations of mana. Each had to be meticulously masked. The imprint her spell left behind had to be manually obscured with surgical precision, so no one, not even the most sensitive elven scout, could detect that magic had been used here. This part demanded complete concentration. She couldn't afford to split her attention to scan their surroundings, even though it heightened the risk of an ambush. Her eyes burned from dryness and strain, her back and legs ached, and the oppressive fog felt like it was sinking into her skull, but she finished the job. "Done," she mouthed silently to her teammates before moving on to the next point. A few feet away, she knelt and began the process again. Burying and covering the mana's imprint in the soil was slightly easier than in the wood. Once she'd finished that node, she moved on to the final point, a second tree positioned to form a triangular array with the first two. When the three-point array was complete, the group resumed their march. Maeve stayed glued to her side, so close Cersei could feel her presence with every step. Cole followed just behind, poised to summon a barrier at the first sign of danger. Fane took up the rear, ever watchful. A team built specifically for this mission, Cersei thought grimly. Being both the newest member and the linchpin of the Alacrian army's efforts was a burden she felt in every breath. A combat team would normally spend years training together before ever stepping onto the battlefield, but this group had been thrown together under duress. Their original sentry had died during training only weeks ago, and Cersei, having only recently received her emblem, had been assigned as the replacement. Fane's overt hostility was grating, but only marginally more so than Maeve's tendency to treat her like a child, or the awkward, thinly veiled crush Cole seemed to be nursing. It was at least some comfort to know they weren't the only team operating in the forest. Maybe one of the other teams has already secured a route, Cersei hoped, though she knew the odds were slim. Among all the units dispatched, hers had the greatest chance of success. Her freshly earned emblem granted them an advantage no other team possessed. Suddenly, Maeve's arm shot out, stopping Cersei with a firm press against her chest. Her amber eyes locked onto Cersei's before she pointed downward. Nearly hidden beneath the fog was a shallow ditch lined with wooden spikes. The spikes weren't sharpened, Maeve whispered. They were twisted into this shape. Plant magic. After the first assault on the elven forest, survivors had brought back tales of strangling vines, toxic spores, and trees that pulled themselves from the ground to walk. The thought that the enemy could command such forces was both astonishing and terrifying. "I thought you said this way was safe," Fane muttered, scowling as he peered into the pit. "We'll have to stop somewhere safe so I can scout a new route," Cersei said, keeping her eyes forward. She didn't want to see the frustration, the sympathy, or the quiet acceptance that always lingered in Fane's, Maeve's, or Cole's expressions. They couldn't march an army through land riddled with living traps. They needed another path. Navigating the forest was difficult enough, without the gnawing doubt crusting at the back of Cersei's mind. Still, the relentless physical strain of their endless march eventually dulled even that persistent anxiety. Her legs throbbed with pain, and her back ached so fiercely she felt older than her blood matriarch, but she pressed on without complaint. The weak, diffused light overhead gradually dimmed, signaling that somewhere beyond the oppressive fog, the sun was beginning to set. "Merciful Vritra," she muttered as they finally settled in for the night, nestled among the thick branches of a towering tree. Cole handed out strips of salted dried meat and a candied root to each of them, offering Cersei a gentle smile as he passed her share. Her portions were noticeably larger than the others. They ate in silence, savoring the rare pause after days without rest. As Cersei sucked the sugar from the root, her thoughts drifted to Cole's demeanor. She dealt with similar attention during training, men whose admiration veiled their distraction, but her focus had always remained fixed on earning her emblem. Back home, avoiding such things had been simple. Here, it was just the four of them. She feared that rejecting Cole too harshly might disrupt their delicate team dynamic, perhaps even endangering them all. There was no room for idealism. She would have to endure it and, if necessary, use the shield's feelings to keep the mission on track. After the light meal, Cersei forced her thoughts away from trivial matters and turned her attention back to the task that mattered most: finding a valid path through the fog. Igniting her emblem, she activated True Sense. The moment it took hold, that familiar, unsettling sensation washed over her, like stripping bare in the middle of a snowstorm. Her awareness detached from her body, drifting upward like a specter. High above the trees, she hovered, narrowing her true sense to focus on a single element. Her real body remained slumped in place, motionless on the branch below, while an ache pulsed steadily in her skull. Particles of ambient mana shimmered green as she honed in on wind mana. Full mastery of True Sense would eventually allow her to perceive all four elemental attributes in the atmosphere, but for now, wind attribute mana was enough. Clusters of it would indicate movement, currents, and, hopefully, the location of the hidden elven kingdom. As she extended her reach, the throbbing in her head intensified, bordering on unbearable. The incorporeal state trembled under the strain. Just a little longer. There. Immediately, Cersei was pulled back into her body, the powerful emblem anchoring her with a jolt. The last flicker of green mana faded from her vision as her physical eyes opened, and a sharp, pained gasp escaped her lungs. "Were you successful, Cersei?" Fane asked at once, impatience sharpening his voice. Her body felt chilled, as though she'd fallen asleep outside and woken in the dark. Still, Her lips curved into a faint smile. The kingdom itself is still too far, but I found a large area of mana fluctuations about a day's travel from here. How large? Maeve asked cautiously. Large enough to be a settlement, or even a town? Cole ran a hand through his long hair and let out a breath. At least we're heading the right way. Nice to know all this hasn't been for nothing. Great job, Cersei. Really great work. As expected from a member of the Milview blood, Fane grunted, tearing off a piece of dried meat. Up till now, I was wondering if you truly were of that lineage, he added, eyes fixed on her, gauging her reaction. Cersei ignored him. Tilting her head back, she gazed up into the branches above and spoke aloud, not to anyone in particular. I won't be able to use my emblem for another day, but once I've recovered, I want to do another scan, this time focused on water attribute mana. Sensible, Maeve said, casting a sharp glance at Fane. From our reports, these elves are particularly adept with water or wind magic. The striker turned away from them both, spat a chunk of gristle off the edge of his perch, and fell into a brooding silence. After finishing their modest meal, the team settled in as best they could among the thick branches of the ancient tree, buried deep within enemy territory. Either Cersei or Cole had to remain alert in case anything, or anyone, approached. But with her mana reserves nearly depleted from using her emblem, the first watch fell to Cole and Maeve. The weathered shield, easily 20 years her senior, gave her a wink before quietly casting a small veiling barrier around their position. With that, Cersei and Fane were left to rest. Despite the cold press of the branch against her back and the constant fear of falling, even though they had tied themselves securely to the trunk, Cersei soon felt herself drifting into sleep. Then Maeve was there, gently shaking her awake. "It's been 2 hours," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she signaled Cersei to take over before turning to rouse Fane. "No need to worry about elven soldiers or Decathian mages," Cersei groaned inwardly. "These 2-hour shifts will be the death of me." Channeling mana into her crest, Cersei extended her awareness to a radius of 30 yards around them. Normally, she could stretch her senses over 100 yards regardless of terrain, but the mysterious magic that cloaked the endless forest restricted everyone's perception, even hers. To pass the time, she pushed her senses to their limits, exploring the shapes of bird nests and rabbit burrows hidden among the trees. Could it be that the animals were immune to the fog's effects? If they could navigate the forest freely, maybe there was a way to use that to their advantage. Cersei recalled training with a young woman who could inhabit the consciousness of a small animal, see through its eyes, and guide it with simple commands. How far could Cersei see if she could link her mind to one of the birds and send it soaring above the treetops? Farther than 30 yards, no doubt, she thought bitterly. Her thoughts were cut short as multiple figures entered the edge of her awareness. Elves. Careful not to disturb the tree or lose her balance, Cersei turned toward Fane and gave him a meaningful look. "How many?" he mouthed. She held up 3 fingers and pointed toward their approach. He nodded, and together they quietly roused Maeve and Cole, muffling their breaths to avoid making a sound. Cole quickly erected a 2-layered barrier that muffled sounds and veiled their presence. Though his breathing was heavy and sweat dampened his brow from casting spells all day with little rest, his expression remained resolute. He had to endure. "About a dozen yards away," Cersei whispered solemnly. "Hopefully they'll pass us by," Fane said. "If they seem suspicious, I'll drop down on them, breaking free of the barrier. If I can take them down quickly, I will. Otherwise, I'll run and draw them off. You 3 stay hidden." He glanced at Maeve. "Keep the sentry alive. Without her, we're doomed." Cersei resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "We can all fight, Fane. 4 against 3 is better odds than 3 against 1. Cole rubbed his stubbled chin. "Even if we kill them quickly, the magic will leave traces. It's too risky." "Cole's right," Maeve said, tying her dark hair into a tight knot. "But so is Fane. We're expendable on this mission, Cersei. You are not. Let's avoid a fight if we can." But if we can't, you and Cole will bolt while Fane and I hold off the elves." Seeing the doubt flicker across Cersei's face, Maeve smiled confidently. "I'll take 2 to 4 of these watered-down Decathian mages any day." The words grated on Cersei's nerves, but she understood the protective instinct beneath them. She knew it would be selfish to insist on throwing herself into an unnecessary battle. Of all the teams trying to secure a route to the Elven Kingdom, she was the only sentry with an emblem strong enough to navigate the Elshire Forest effectively. Completing the mission was the priority. Still, despite Maeve's insistence that the others were expendable, Cersei knew their chances of success would plummet if any one of them was lost. They stopped whispering, fearing the elves might hear them even through the barrier. As the footsteps drew closer beneath the tree, Cersei held her breath. "Oh, Vritra, please let them keep walking." Gray stepped back as Lady Vera poised the thin metal stick she called a foil for a horizontal swing, yet somehow the foil still managed to slap across his left arm. "How?" he hissed, rubbing the fresh sting. "I thought I dodged that." "You're too focused on my weapon," Lady Vera said calmly, keeping her body perfectly still. "Your vision should encompass your enemy, or enemies, as a whole. What do you see differently right now?" Gray glanced down at the foil, still pointed at him. "Aside from the obvious," he replied cautiously. That earned him another sharp smack from her weapon. "Don't get smart with me, kid." Okay, Gray yelped, raising his hands. "And I have a name, you know." "I'm aware you were named after a rather boring color," Lady Vera said bluntly, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Now, answer my question." Afraid of another hit, Gray quickly scanned the tall woman before him. She wore a dark shirt and tight-fitting black pants, her long, curly red hair swirling like flames with every subtle movement. Several months had passed since Gray's capture, torture, and eventual rescue. After his injuries had fully healed, his lessons with Lady Vera began in earnest. Her methods were unforgiving, and her personality had all the warmth of a glacier, but she was undeniably effective. "Well?" she pressed, snapping him out of his thoughts. Gray exhaled slowly, then pointed to her foot. "You pivoted using your lead leg, bringing your back foot forward to extend your reach." "Good," she said with a nod of approval. "Although, if you weren't able to see that from the track mark on the ground..." Yes, then I don't deserve to be your student," Gray finished, rolling his eyes slightly. "Now, how do I get better?" Lady Vera muttered something under her breath, then turned from him and walked toward the small man-made pond in the corner of her yard. Their training ground, 50 yards in both length and width, was, in fact, her backyard. The very fact that Lady Vera had a backyard at all, especially in a city where towering high-rises claimed nearly every square foot of land, spoke volumes about her wealth and influence. And this wasn't just any backyard. It looked like something pulled from the pages of an old nature magazine, complete with wild greenery and a serene atmosphere untouched by the urban sprawl. A 20-foot wall encircled the entire area, cutting it off from the outside world and adding yet another layer of mystery to her status. Gray couldn't help but wonder what kind of position she truly held at Vitholm Academy, the military school he was currently enrolled in. They reached the crystal-clear pond, nestled at the far end of the yard, a real pond, with real, live fish darting beneath the surface. Lady Vera lowered herself gracefully to the edge and gestured for Gray to sit beside her. "Try catching a fish with your hands," she said calmly. "No kai." "What?" Gray blinked, taken aback. "Won't they die if they're out of the water? I don't think I can afford to replace something like that." She offered him a rare, almost playful smile. "Don't worry about that. Just try." Gray eyed the rare aquatic creatures warily. He'd only ever seen fish in their frozen, processed form, wrapped in plastic and far from alive. Still, he reached into the pond, fingers just brushing the surface before a flash of gold and black shot past him, vanishing to the far end of the water. "So fast!" he exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief. A sharp snap echoed beside him. Lady Vera had raised her fingers to draw his attention. "Again!" He obeyed, plunging his hands into the water again and again. Each attempt was more frantic than the last, but even after a dozen tries, he couldn't get close, not even a brush of a scale. Frustrated and soaked up to the elbows, he slapped angrily at the water, only to lose his footing on the slick stones and tumble in head first. "Gah!" he yelped, flailing before surfacing with a gasp. From the shore, Lady Vera laughed, actually laughed. Clambering out of the pond, Gray collapsed on the grass, panting. "What's the point of this anyway? You can't catch one with just your hands. It's impossible." "Is that so?" she replied, her voice tinged with smug amusement. "Yes, it is. There's no way you can—" He lifted his head to glare at her, only to stop mid-sentence. In her hand was a flapping, gleaming fish. "What? No way! Do it again!" Lady Vera shrugged, tossed the fish casually back into the pond, and said, "Sure." Scrambling upright, Gray narrowed his eyes and watched her every move, determined to catch her cheating if she used Kai or pulled some sleight of hand. Leaning forward, Lady Vera hovered her hand just above the surface of the pond. She remained still, her eyes tracking the movement beneath the ripples. As a fish neared, she eased her hand into the water with deliberate slowness. The gentle disturbance startled the fish, causing it to dart forward right into her waiting grasp. With a subtle twitch of her fingers, she closed her fist around it, firm yet careful not to harm the wriggling creature. A smug grin tugged at her lips as she released it. The fish vanished in a blur into the deeper waters. "Now do you believe me?" she said, brushing the water off her hand. Gray blinked, dumbfounded. "I don't get it. You move so slowly." His eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Wait, did you train those fish to swim into your hand?" Lady Vera shot him a flat, unimpressed look. "Do I look like someone who would waste her time training fish to amuse street rats?" The deadpan in her tone made it clear she had neither the patience nor the inclination for such a frivolous endeavor. Scratching the back of his head, Gray relented. "I guess not, but I still don't understand the point, unless this was just an excuse to show off." Without warning, Lady Vera flicked a splash of water into his face. "I did it," she said, tone sharpening, "to show you that you and those fish, the very ones that made a fool of you, aren't so different." Gray wiped the water from his eyes, frowning. "What?" he asked, completely lost. Lady Vera's hand lashed out toward Gray's face without warning, and he instinctively jerked his head to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. "Your reaction speed is fast," she said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Frighteningly so. But it's instinctual, untamed, just like these fish." Gray frowned. "Untamed? What does that mean?" "Whether you realize it or not, your body is already moving before your mind registers the threat. The moment your opponent's muscles tense to throw a punch, your brain sends the signal to dodge. It's fast, but predictable. Against the untrained, you'll dominate. But against someone stronger, someone observant, that instinct becomes a weakness, just like I knew exactly how the fish would move." Gray mulled over her words. They made perfect sense. "So how do I tame it?" "By responding, not reacting," she said, rising to her feet and slipping into an offensive stance. "Aren't those the same thing?" he asked. She shook her head. "Number one is instinctual. The other is intentional. Up until now, we've focused on your conditioning, but it's time to move forward. You need to start reading your opponent and making decisions, not just flinching faster than they can strike." A grin spread across Gray's face as he bounced lightly on the balls of his feet. Finally, the fun part. "Fun for me," Lady Vera said with a dark glint in her eyes, her foil slicing through the air in a smooth figure 8. "Lucky for you, your next class is starting soon. We'll pick this up tomorrow." Gray groaned, rubbing the welt on his arm from her earlier strike. "There's a car waiting to take you back to school," she added, waving him off. "Now scram." She stopped mid-sentence, eyes narrowing on something just past Gray's shoulder. He turned to see what she was looking at. One of the household staff, a young woman in uniform, was hurrying toward them, her expression tense. The young woman curtsied respectfully, her eyes flicking briefly to Gray before she spoke. "Ma'am, we've just received a call. There was an explosion at Vitholm. The enforcers have locked down the school and instructed all students and staff to stay away until further notice." "The enforcers? But why?" Gray's voice caught in his throat as dread tightened in his chest. "Oh my God. Nico. A panicked man may drown in a puddle, while a calm man may swim across the ocean, Gray," Lady Vera said evenly. He blinked. "What?" "It means calm down." Before he could form a reply, another servant approached swiftly across the yard. He stopped a few paces away and bowed. "Mr. Gray, you have an urgent call from a Mr. Nico. My apologies for the interruption, but he seems quite distressed." Gray started toward the house on instinct, only remembering halfway to pause and glance back at his mentor. She waved him on. "Go, Gray. See to your friend. Then return. Since it appears you're free from class today, we'll use the time to work more on your reactions." "Nico," Gray gasped into the receiver, breathless from sprinting through the house. "What is it? Are you okay?" Gray, I don't know what happened. The Kai restrainer must have malfunctioned. But I checked it just a few days ago and it was fine. I swear it was fine." Nico's voice trembled, thick with panic. "It's all my fault." Gray frowned, trying to make sense of the rush of words. "What happened, Nico? What's your fault? You're not making any sense." "It's Cecilia," Nico said, his voice cracking. "She had one of her accidents. Can you come down to the school, Gray? Please? The enforcers are here. They're taking statements, asking all these questions. I'm scared. What if they take her away? What if they lock her up?" Gray's chest tightened. "But Cecilia, she's not hurt? She's alive?" Yes, she's alive," Nico replied quickly. "But it was bad, Gray. Really bad. She demolished part of the administration building." Gray hesitated, torn. Would Lady Vera allow him to go if he asked? Or would she scold him again, tell him to stay out of things that didn't concern him, to keep his eyes forward and let the enforcers handle it? Deep down, he already knew the answer. "They've asked everyone to stay away, Nico. I can't come. I mean, I want to, but they won't let me through." "Can you meet me somewhere else then?" Nico pleaded. "We need to figure out what to do if they try to lock her up." "Nico," Gray interrupted gently. "Listen, we don't know that's going to happen, no? Just don't panic. A panicked man can drown in a puddle, but a calm man can swim across an ocean, or something like that. We just need to stay calm." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Nico asked again, more desperate this time, "So, where can we meet?" Gray clenched the receiver tighter, the image of Lady Vera's stern, disappointed expression already forming in his mind at the thought of asking to skip extra lessons. "I'm sorry, Nico, but I can't. Lessons, you know," Gray said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I'm sure everything's going to be okay. Just keep your head down and don't cause any trouble. Who knows, maybe this could even be a good thing. Maybe someone will take notice and actually get help for Cecilia so she doesn't have to rely on just..." He caught himself, jaw tightening. He'd almost said so. "She doesn't have to rely on just your inventions." There was a pause before Nico responded, quieter this time. "Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Gray. I'm sure you've got a lot on your plate, trying to be king and all. I'll let you go." Gray could almost hear the slump of Nico's shoulders, the way he always lowered his head when he felt like a burden. Still, Lady Vera was right. He had to keep looking forward, toward the future. If he became king, he could protect them all. He could avenge Headmaster Wilbeck. He could make everything right. Call me when you find out what the enforcers plan to do, okay? Yeah, sure, bye, Gray. The line went dead. Gray sat in silence, staring blankly at the receiver in his hand. Thoughts of Cecilia and Nico churned in his chest, heavy and uncomfortable. It's going to be fine, he told himself. Tell yourself that enough, Gray, and maybe you'll start to believe it. Art opened his eyes, letting out a deep breath. It had only been a few days since his last dream, or memory, or whatever these visions were, and this one was particularly bad. It was a memory he would never forget, dream or no dream. He looked outside the window to see that the sun had yet to fully rise, meaning he had at most only 2 or 3 hours of sleep. With a groan, he got out of bed and washed up, hoping the cold water would help wash out the fatigue that seemed to have made a permanent home in his body. "You're awake?" his bond asked, not bothering to speak aloud. "Yeah, I don't think I can fall back asleep. Want to join me for a morning stretch outside?" "As enticing as that sounds, it would require me to get out of bed," she replied, pulling the covers over her head. "Growing children do need their sleep," he agreed with a chuckle, drying his hair with a towel. "That immature retort speaks volumes about which one of us is the child," she replied casually. He let out a laugh. "You got me there." After dressing in a plain, loose shirt and dark trousers, Art headed for the door. As he passed his desk, he glanced down at the messy paper scattered with bits and pieces of the poem he was trying to remember. On second thought, he decided to pay Radius a short visit. Hopefully, the man was functional enough to repeat the poem, or, even better, provide a clear explanation. He greeted the few maids and workers who were already awake and preparing for the day as he made his way down to the dungeon. Walking through the long, dimly lit hallway leading to the entrance of the first level, Art spotted a familiar face guarding the door, using the term guarding very loosely. Albold Chaffer, the young elf Virion had introduced him to on an earlier visit, was currently nodding off at his post beside the large metal door. With a smirk, Art erased his presence and softened his breathing. He coded his footsteps in mana in the same precise manner he had practiced back when training alone in the forests of Ephiotus. Cautiously, he crept toward the sleeping guard, but as soon as he was within a few yards of the door, Albold's eyes shot open and a thick layer of mana covered his body. His swords carved through the air between them as he unleashed a quick crossing attack. Art stopped short, surprised that Albold had noticed his approach and reacted so swiftly. "General Arthur?" Albold said incredulously, quickly sheathing his twin blades. "Sorry about that. I swore I felt someone sneaking up on me." "I was sneaking up on you. Weren't you asleep?" Art asked suspiciously. "Ah, you caught me." Albold looked at his feet. "Please don't tell Commander Virion. I only have a few days left doing guard duty. I can't stay here any longer." "Relax. I was just impressed," Art chuckled. "Virion was right. Your senses are good." "It saved my ass more than a couple times in my life," Albold said, smiling sheepishly. "So, what can I do for you, General?" "I need to speak to a prisoner," Art replied. "Is Gentry inside?" Albold nodded and opened the door. "I can't think of a time where he hasn't been inside." Albold led Art inside, and they soon found Gentry asleep on a cot in one of the nearby cells. What's going on?" Gentry mumbled when they shook him awake. "General? To what do I owe the pleasure of your disturbing my rest?" Art smirked. "Just returning the favor. Can you open Radius's cell for a moment? There's something I want to ask him," he explained. The interrogator rubbed his eyes as he stood and stretched, his joints cracking and bones creaking like an animated skeleton. Of course, and my apologies again for calling the entire council. I was certain the traitor would reveal something important. Gentry set about unlocking the door leading down to the dungeon's lower level. After a few clicks, he motioned for Albold to help, and together they heaved the doors open. They all froze. Gentry's assistant lay splayed on the floor, several black spikes driven through his body. Seeing the spikes, Art's gaze immediately shifted to the cell where Uto was held. The vault door was open, and the retainer stood just outside, leaning against the wall. Heart hammering, Art quickly imbued mana around himself and threw his body in front of Gentry and Albold, fearing an attack from Uto, but the retainer remained completely still and silent. "Duvet!" Gentry cried, oblivious to the retainer. "He's dead," Art muttered, eyes fixed on Uto. As his mana-enhanced vision adjusted to the darkness, he saw the spikes piercing Uto's chest and stomach, pinning him to the wall like an insect trapped in a box. Despite this, Uto was smiling. "Radius." Art stepped into the dungeon, immediately feeling the magic-restricting wards drain his protections. Jumping over the assistant's corpse, he swung open the door to Radius's cell, only to find the old dwarf had met the same fate as Uto and Duvet. Radius was dead.